Chapter 1089. In the Scarlet Heaven Academy, Ling Han was definitely a legend. He had only been in the academy for a mere 2 years, yet he had already reached the medium extreme of the mountain river tier. Moreover, his battle prowess was even more astonishing. It was possible that he had reached the level of a legendary 5-star genius. Moreover, his experiences were even more astonishing. He had repeatedly exchanged blows with the only son of the great General Zhao, and he had actually gained the upper hand. In fact, he had even been conferred the title of a 7th-rank military general by the Empress. Such a young 7th-rank military general was unprecedented in the history of the empire. In fact, there were many students in the Eastern institution who felt that it was a pity. If Ling Han had entered the Scarlet Heaven Academy 5 years later, wouldn't he have become the pride of the Eastern institution? Yang Shuang faltered for a moment before immediately shouting at Ling Han. Ling Han, you actually dare to come to our Eastern institution? Ling Han frowned and said, release him and return the sword. We can talk about other things later. Haha. This person really is your friend. Yang Shuang laughed loudly. He stepped on Jin Zhihui's face and said, what if I don't? He wasn't afraid of Ling Han. After all, his battle prowess was at the late stage of the consummate level. If Ling Han wanted to fight him, he would definitely be seeking his own humiliation. A cold glint flashed across Ling Han's eyes, and he said, I'll chop off this leg of yours. Yang Shuang laughed madly. This was truly hilarious. Ling Han, are you too full of yourself? Do you think that no one in the academy can subdue you? Yang Shuang pointed his sword at Ling Han. Ling Han didn't reply, and instead strode toward Yang Shuang. His expression was dark, and the flames of his rage had materialized. It was suffocating. Beat him up. Yang Shuang roared. What a joke. This was the Eastern institution. Go. The students of the Eastern institution all charged over. Ling Han had actually swaggered his way from the Northern institution to the Eastern institution. This was already a humiliating matter, and if they allowed him to return safely, then there would be no need for the students of the Eastern institution to cultivate anymore. They would all buy a piece of tofu and commit suicide. In the blink of an eye, more than 10 fists were thrown at him at the same time. With a thought from Ling Han, the divine patterns of gravity activated. Pa 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 pa. These people were unable to approach him at all, and they were immediately pressed to the ground by the terrifying gravitational force. As his cultivation grew higher and higher, the might of the divine rune of gravity naturally grew stronger and stronger. At the very least, it wasn't something that anyone below the consummate level could withstand. As he walked, people fell to the ground, but not a single one of them was able to pose a substantial threat to him. Yang Shuang felt a sense of unease. Now that he was face to face with Ling Han, there were no more obstacles between the two of them. Logically speaking, with his superior combat strength, he shouldn't feel uneasy. But now, there was an indescribable irritation that made him feel uneasy. Kneel down and apologize to Brother Jean. If Brother Jean is willing to forgive you, we'll write off everything. If not, I'll let you know what regret is. Ling Han coldly spoke. Bullshit. Yang Shuang flew into a rage. He pulled back his leg and kicked at Ling Han. Ling Han also kicked out. Pong, the two of them collided, and both of them retreated in retreat. Yang Shuang was stunned, and he said, we've broken through to the high extreme. Not only that, but Ling Han's power was actually on par with his. This caused his scalp to go numb with shock. He was at the middle stage of the consummate level, and his power was similar to his cultivation level. His battle prowess could surpass 1 star. Ling Han was only at the early stage of the high extreme, but his power was on par with his. What did this mean? That his power had surpassed 5 stars. On Joint Peace Planet, 5-star geniuses only existed in legends. The Empress might be a 5-star genius, but no one had ever proven it. But now, someone had surpassed 5 stars in power alone. How could he not be shocked? If you learned a few more ultimate techniques, wouldn't your battle prowess surpass 6 stars? Moreover, it had only been 2 years and this guy had actually reached the high extreme. How could there be such a fast speed? Kneel. Ling Han moved and suppressed Yang Shuang. Don't even think about it. Yang Shuang countered. He definitely wouldn't allow himself to be defeated by Ling Han. Ling Han's fists and palms were like collapsing mountains, and as fierce as fire. He discovered that he had underestimated his own battle prowess. As it turned out, his power had already reached the level of surpassing 5 stars. Added with the divine patterns of gravity and flame, his battle prowess could already reach 6 stars. Moreover, he hadn't even used the annihilating dragon star arrow or the fast technique. His peak battle prowess could definitely reach 7 stars. In a head-on battle, he could even fight a cultivator at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Added with his physique and recovery ability, he could be said to be invincible among mountain river tier cultivators. If I want to suppress you, you can only be suppressed. Ling Han used the fast technique, and each of his attacks was swift and fierce. Sword chi surged from his fingertips, and it was as if they were flying swords. Yang Shuang screamed in pain. His body was continuously struck, and blood splattered everywhere. Although the injuries weren't severe, the scene was extremely tragic. Even senior brother Yang was being trampled on like this. How many people in the Eastern Institution could be a match for Ling Han? Peng! Ling Han finally knocked Yang Shuang over with a single punch. He snatched the sword from his hand, and then helped Jin Zhihui up. He asked, "Brother Jin, are you alright?" "I'm fine. It's not that severe." Jin Zhihui crawled up. A few of his bones had been broken, but to cultivators this was nothing. With good alchemical pills he could recover in a few days. Ling Han nodded. He then turned to Yang Shuang and said, "I said I would chop off one of your legs. Don't tell me you thought I was just scaring you. You dare." Yang Shuang was trembling in fear. "This is the Eastern Institution. If you dare to act so violently, the Academy will definitely not let you off." Whoosh! Ling Han unsheathed his sword. Sword light flashed, and one of Yang Shuang's legs was chopped off. "This is my friend. Moreover, this sword was specially given to me by my friend. You stole my sword, so it's perfectly reasonable for me to deal with you. I'm already being considerate of the Academy by not chopping off your head. Don't you know that stealing from an official of the Imperial Court is a grave crime?" Yang Shuang faltered for a moment. Only then did he know to scream in agony. When he heard Ling Han's words, he felt even more depressed. It was indeed as Ling Han had said. Stealing from an official of the Imperial Court was a grave crime in the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. However, this matter of stealing the sword could be a big or small one. After all, it hadn't been handed over to Ling Han. If he could suppress Ling Han in battle prowess, would Ling Han still have the face to ask for the sword? However, the problem was that he was actually no match for Ling Han. Thus, he could only swallow his grievance after losing one of his legs. Thankfully, after reaching the immortal level, regrowing severed limbs wasn't difficult. As long as his life force wasn't damaged, he wouldn't be considered crippled. "Pa!" Ling Han slapped Yang Shuang again, and menacingly said, "Do you think this matter will end so easily? Just then I was only punishing you for stealing my sword. Now I'm avenging brother Jin." "Pa pa pa!" He continuously slapped Yang Shuang. "Pu pew pew!" All of Yang Shuang's teeth were knocked out, and his face was covered in dirty blood. It was a tragic sight. "Enough!" A young man rushed over, his expression filled with dissatisfaction, reading on a mobile phone. Chapter 1090. Senior Brother Tang. The students from the Eastern Institution were all overjoyed. They had been anxious before, but now they seemed to have found a pillar of support, and all of them regained their confidence. Tang Jiu was ranked 9th among all the students in the Eastern Institution. He was at the peak of the consummate level and he could surpass 3 stars. He was a super genius that only appeared once every 10,000 years. He was called Tang Jiu because he was ranked 9th. A few decades ago he had been called Tang Shi, but in the future he would be called Tang Ba, Tang Qi and so on. "Release him," Tang Jiu said coldly. His eyes were as bright as 2 fireballs, and his arms were bare. They were covered in crimson divine patterns that extended from the back of his palms to his shoulders, as if they were made of red metal. He was confident and domineering. These were the characteristics that an elite should have. Ling Han stepped on Yang Shuang. He would treat Yang Shuang the same way Yang Shuang had treated Jin Zhihui just now. An eye for an eye, and he would not be lenient. He looked at Tang Jiu and asked why. "Because I, Tang Jiu, opened my mouth," Tang Jiu said coldly. He was already furious because the other party still dared to question him. Tang Jiu has never heard of that. Ling Han shook his head. You're courting death. Tang Jiu did not waste any more words and attacked. Shua! A cold light swept past, slicing towards Ling Han's throat. A curved bow had appeared in Tang Jiu's hands, and it emitted a frightening cold light. Ling Han kicked out, lifting Yang Shuang up. Pooh! The cold light immediately hit Yang Shuang's butt, and blood splattered everywhere. Yang Shuang's butt naturally bloomed. He laughed and said, Tisk tsk tsk. Are you two having an affair? Why are you aiming at my butt? Yang Shuang looked at Tang Jiu resentfully. Couldn't you aim a little better? Why did you hit me? Tang Jiu was furious and he pointed at Yang Shuang. If you have the guts, then let's fight to our heart's content. Ling Han shook his head and said, This isn't a hostage. It's my new treasured sword. You can call it a human sword, but you can also call it a bitch. He grabbed Yang Shuang's neck, and under the infusion of origin power, Yang Shuang's body could only straighten, and he was forcefully turned into a large treasured sword. Yang Shuang felt like dying. All he had done was snatch back Ling Han's sword. Was there really a need to target him like this? Ling Han, you're making me lose. Tang Jiu provoked. Who do you think you are? Do I need to care about you? Ling Han sneered. Tang Jiu immediately flew into a rage. Fine, not only did his provocation fail, he was completely enraged. He hatefully said, You came to our east courtyard to behave atrociously. We definitely won't let you go back in one piece. Junior brother Yang, just accept your bad luck. The Academy's reputation is greater than yours. He was no longer afraid and attacked with all his might. Ling Han swung his sword to block. With his strength, swinging a person was a piece of cake. However, Yang Shuang was in a miserable state. Not only did he have to endure Ling Han's sword intent, but he also had to endure Tang Jiu's relentless attacks. In just a few moves, at least a few dozen of his bones had been broken. If this continued, he might really die. Ling Han casually tossed Yang Shuang to the side. If he continued to fight, he would go too far. Right now, he had only heavily injured Yang Shuang, and he could still justify his actions. However, if he killed Yang Shuang, it would be difficult to clean up the mess. There was also no need to do so. I'll beat you up. Tang Jiu let out a long howl. This time, he no longer had any misgivings, and his attacks became even more violent. Hee hee. Ling Han laughed and unleashed the 7 kills subduing soul technique. Tang Jiu's attacks immediately faltered, and he saw Ling Han's fists smashing over, forcing him to defend himself. There were relatively few secret techniques that cultivated the divine sense, which was why the 7 kills subduing soul technique was so valuable. Although Tang Jiu's cultivation level was higher, his divine sense was not necessarily stronger than Ling Han's. After being targeted by a single attack, his combat strength immediately dropped. The two of them fought fiercely, and Ling Han constantly used the 7 kills subduing soul technique to restrict his opponent's combat strength until it was about the same level as his own. Tang Jiu was infuriated. He was clearly able to crush Ling Han in terms of combat strength, but because of his opponent's indefensible spiritual attacks, he was always beaten up at crucial moments. His attacks were unable to smoothly unleash, and he was only able to display 10 to 20% of his combat strength. He had never been so depressed before, and he even felt like vomiting blood. The other students were all stunned. Was Ling Han trying to defy the heavens? How many stars did his combat strength surpass? It's not that Ling Han's combat strength is that strong, but that senior brother Tang's combat strength has been weakened. But even if it's weakened, it's still Ling Han's own ability. This should still be considered Ling Han's combat strength, right? After all, there were too few secret techniques related to spiritual attacks. They were so rare that not many people would cultivate the strength of their divine sense to defend against this kind of attack. Thus, did Ling Han's actions mean that he had once again improved his ability to challenge those at a higher cultivation level? Was his battle prowess at the late stage of the consummate level, or battle prowess that surpassed the peak stage of the consummate level by 3 stars? After exchanging a few more blows, Tang Jiu angrily leaped to the side. He wasn't going to fight anymore. If he continued fighting, he would go crazy. He wouldn't be able to display his full battle prowess at all, and he was feeling very aggrieved. I'm not going to fight anymore, Ling Han said with a smile. Tang Zhou glared at Ling Han hatefully and didn't say anything. With a flick of his sleeve, he left. He really couldn't do anything to Ling Han, not to mention that Ling Han had only just advanced to the high extreme, while he had already been at the peak stage of the consummate level for many years. He was completely bullying the weak. If he couldn't even bully him, then what was the point of fighting? With Tang Zhou's departure, everyone was speechless. There were only 8 elites above Tang Zhou, but not a single one of them had appeared now. They had either gone out to train or were cultivating in seclusion. How could they possibly be at his beck and call? It was already a surprise that they had managed to invite Tang Zhou out, but Tang Zhou couldn't do anything to Ling Han, so the Eastern institution was really at its wit's end. Brother Jin, please, Ling Han said to Jin Zhihui with a smile. Jin Zhihui nodded. The two of them entered through the gates of the Eastern institution and barged through the Eastern institution, heading towards the Northern institution. On the way, the students of the Eastern institution followed them, all of them furious and clenching their fists. You guys really treat this as a passageway? Jin Zhihui was curious and said, Brother Ling, why do these people keep following us? Why did they make things difficult for me when I said I wanted to see you at the gate? Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Brother Jin, you don't know, but this Scarlet Heaven Academy is divided into 4 institutions. He explained the whole story, and Jin Zhihui couldn't help but feel gloomy. So it turned out that he had made a mistake. Brother Jin, this is the sword that you forged? Ling Han patted his shoulder and pointed at the treasured sword in his hand. Jin Zhihui instantly raised his eyebrows, nodded repeatedly and said, That's right, it's Brother Ling. The material used to forge this sword is a piece of meteorite metal. After it was purchased by our villa, we did many tests, but all of them concluded that it was only a piece of level 1 godly metal. However, after several thousand years of research, this is definitely not as simple as a piece of level 1 godly metal. Indeed, it's only a piece of level 1 godly metal now, yet it seems to possess a life of its own, and has the ability to grow. I've researched for over 10,000 years, and I've been trying to figure out how to maintain its ability to grow after forging it into a sword form, and how to not destroy its appearance and might. Now, I've finally succeeded. Chapter 1092. Ling Han was obviously not very good at coming up with names. Just look at the names he had come up with, they were simply too horrible to look at. It's godly metal now, but it might become divine metal in the future, so I'll call it Divine God Sword. Ling Han thought for a while, and instantly lost interest, casually giving this Divine God Sword a name. However, isn't Divine Demon Sword more domineering? Let's call it Divine Demon Sword. Ling Han was very unprincipled, and he was really bad at coming up with names. He chuckled as he slashed to his heart's content, allowing the Divine Demon Sword to continuously grow. With each slash, the Divine Demon Sword would improve a little, but this improvement was very slow. If it really wanted to complete the qualitative change from level 1 to level 2, it would need a huge amount of godly metal to support it. Thankfully for me now, level 1 godly metal really isn't that valuable. Burn money for me. Ling Han slashed for a total of 3 days and 3 nights in the Black Tower, and the amount of level 1 godly metal that he had slashed into pieces was innumerable. During this time, he also went out once to replenish a large amount of godly metal. Finally, after 3 days, the Divine Demon Sword welcomed a qualitative change. It advanced to the level of level 2 godly metal. Ling Han discovered that the Divine Demon Sword's ability to accommodate his martial intent had also reached a pinnacle during this process of qualitative change. In a short instant, he had actually inscribed 7 divine patterns on the body of the sword. This made Ling Han extremely happy. It should be known that using one's own martial art intent to leave a mark on a weapon in the form of a divine pattern was an extremely long process. After all, it was activated by intent and not origin power. Thus, nurturing a god tool would at least be a matter of several decades or centuries. However, when the Divine Demon Sword underwent a qualitative change, it was as if it had become a blank sheet of paper that Ling Han could draw freely. In the blink of an eye, 7 divine patterns had been engraved onto it. How could Ling Han not be delighted? Now the toughness of the sword has reached the level of level 2 godly metal, and the might of the Divine Demon Sword is level 1 god tool. This meant that if he did not activate the Divine Sword, and only used his own power to strike, the divine demon sword would be an ordinary level 2 god tool, and not a god tool. However, if he unleashed the might of the divine demon sword, he would be able to unleash the battle prowess of a level 1 god tool. I have to continue to improve until my strength is on par with mine. Otherwise, if it were to collide with a 3rd or 4th level divine weapon, there was a high possibility that it would break. He would have to find Jin Zhihui to repair it, or else he might destroy the unique characteristics of the devouring gold steel if he were to carelessly reattach it. Otherwise, why would Jin Zhihui be in such a difficult position and spend over 10,000 years to forge this divine demon sword? But we don't have any money. I'm so poor. Sai Ling Han sighed. Previously, when he had bought level 1 godly metal, he had practically used up all his savings. Now, even if he still had some true origin stones left, how many more pieces of level 2 godly metal could he buy? No wonder Small Tower had said that there was only a theoretical possibility that the devouring metal could transform into divine metal. In the end, they would probably have to find all the level 20 godly metal in the whole immortal realm, and only then would the devouring metal be able to complete the final leap. Oh right, can't the Black Tower also produce godly metal? The Black Tower could produce a piece of godly metal every year, just like how it produced spirit stones. However, if this piece of godly metal was not taken away, then its quality would increase by a certain amount every year. This caused Ling Han to hesitate. After all, even 100 pieces of low-level godly metal could not compare to a single piece of high-level godly metal. Forget it. In any case, the amount of level 2 godly metal that I need is vast, so I'll just give up on this idea. Ling Han said in his mind. As a person, he had to set his sights further. If I don't have money, then I'll work hard to concoct alchemical pills. Ling Han decided to slow down his cultivation. In any case, he had the reincarnation tree, and 1 day of cultivation was equivalent to a year of meditation for others. He also had the demonic power source, so he did not need to worry about accumulating origin power before he reached the Sun-Moon tier. Indeed, he could spend some time on alchemical pill concoction. He worked hard to concoct alchemical pills as he waited for the Majestic Heaven sect to accept him as a disciple. Shui Yinyu frequently came here to cultivate and increase her cultivation level as much as possible. Naturally, she was borrowing the light of the reincarnation tree. Her goal was very clear, and that was to be chosen by the Majestic Heaven sect and be together with Ling Han. Otherwise, who knew how long it would be before she could see this damn pervert again? Furthermore, this guy's brilliance definitely could not be concealed no matter where he went. She had to keep a close eye on him lest some woman took advantage of the situation. However, she did not have very high talent in martial art, and her battle prowess was only 2 stars. This was very impressive in the Scarlet Heaven Academy, but the disciples of the Majestic Heaven sect were all outstanding elites from over 100 great planets. 2 stars was definitely not enough. Thus, if she wanted to enter the Majestic Heaven sect, she had to rely on other methods. Age and cultivation level. Mountain River tier cultivators were definitely not rare in the Majestic Heaven sect, but those who were below 40 years old at the high extreme of the Mountain River tier, or even the consummate level, even if they did not have any battle prowess that surpassed their cultivation level, they could still be classified as supreme prodigies. My battle prowess is not as strong as yours, but my cultivation speed is faster than yours, and my cultivation level far surpasses yours, so I can still suppress you. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh loudly. He wrapped his arms around this seductive beauty and said, "Wife, your intentions have moved your husband very much. Come give me a kiss." Shui Yinyu rolled her eyes at him and said in annoyance, "I only want to enter the Majestic Heaven sect to improve myself. What does that have to do with you?" This woman was really thin-skinned. Ling Han chuckled and said, "Wife, oh wife, this is your bad point. You're always unwilling to admit that you've been conquered by your husband. However, that's all right. I like to slowly train you and I enjoy this process." "Ah," Shui Yinyu exclaimed in surprise. This guy was going all over her again, and there was no need to think about it. He was definitely taking over her 2 high spots. She was both embarrassed and annoyed and said, "Damn pervert, don't do this." "Don't do what?" Ling Han chuckled. Actually, Shui Yinyu's breasts were also filled with beauty. The curves of her breasts were so full that his desire was aroused. He couldn't help but stretch out his hand and continuously knead them until they were deformed. A ripple that would cause one's heart to palpitate rippled out, causing the two of them to be startled at the same time. They raised their heads. The bright moon hung high in the sky, but amidst a sea of twinkling stars, a large star suddenly appeared, exuding an astonishing light. No, it was more like a fountain, spitting out light that illuminated the sky. Boom! Another wave of intense palpitation spread out. For some reason, the two of them were sure that this was coming from that large star, and had something to do with the light it was spitting out. What kind of star is this? Could it be that it has reached the end of its life, and is about to release its final brilliance? The immortal realm was completely different from a small world. A small world only had a single continent, and the stars in the sky were actually multiple meteors that elites could easily shake off. But in the immortal realm, every star was a large star, or even a sun, burning with divine flames that could incinerate heavenly body tier elites. Even great elites of the eternal river tier did not dare to barge in. Every large star had its own life cycle, but it was as long as billions or even tens of billions of years. Even heavenly body tier elites would find it very difficult to reach the end of a large star's life cycle. However, it was said that when a large star died in the end, there would be a great explosion. That was extremely frightening. Just think about how many cultivators could be born from a large star. And this power had burst forth in the short time of a few breaths. Probably even heavenly body tier elites would only be insta-killed. This was a power that could destroy the world, and probably only Genesis tiers would be able to resist it. And now, a large star in the sky suddenly blossomed with brilliance, and it was very possible that it had reached the end of its life. Chapter 1093. Something's wrong. Shui Yinyu shook her head and said, "There shouldn't be any stars in that position." Ling Han was doubtful. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Shui Yinyu nodded seriously. Her talent in martial art was indeed far from being comparable to Ling Han's, but she liked to read all kinds of miscellaneous books. In terms of experience, she was definitely miles ahead of Ling Han. "That's strange. What is this?" Both of them stared at the sky. That huge planet was still spitting out light, sending out waves to every corner of the starry sky. This was enough to affect everyone in the nearby star systems. The next day, everyone was talking about the big star that had appeared the night before. This was truly astonishing. Generally speaking, it was impossible to see a star during the day because the sun's rays were too dazzling. But now that huge star was impressively in front of them. Although the light it was ejecting wasn't that bright, it couldn't be covered by the sunlight. Everyone discussed passionately, curious about this great star's origins. They had never been to this place before, as if it had appeared out of thin air. Big stars can appear out of nowhere. This is incredible. Immediately, some forces sent out starships into the vast universe, wanting to observe this large planet from a close distance. Starships were different from spaceships. Starships were vehicles specifically used to travel through space, and their requirements for materials and power sources were far higher than spaceships. After all, spaceships only needed to be able to fly. If a starship could be purchased by any faction, then a starship could only be purchased by a truly powerful faction. This was because the cost of purchasing and maintaining a starship was simply too high. Besides, who has nothing better to do than go out into space? It would take years to travel from one vast star to another, some even hundreds or thousands of years. Not many people were willing to stay in the lonely starry sky for such a long time. Only a few days later, the starship returned, bringing with it a piece of important news. No, it should be more accurate to say that it was shocking news. That big star is really a tomb. What? When Ling Han heard this, he was immediately shocked. A tomb had actually appeared in the starry sky. This was a very strange thing in itself. However, it could still be seen from so far away. Just how big was this tomb? Even if a mountain were to be thrown into the starry sky, it would be impossible for it to travel a long distance. Even if Ling Han had the eye of truth, he would not be able to do it. How big is this tomb? Ling Han couldn't help but be curious and suddenly wanted to go there. He wasn't the only one thinking this. Even the Majestic Heaven sect had specially sent out a notice, delaying the time of the entrance test indefinitely. they were going to send someone to explore that large tomb first. Every force was extremely cautious about this, and those with starships were already rubbing their palms together, preparing to explore that place. A big tomb in the starry sky. No matter how you look at it, it sounds like a huge treasure trove. However, there were only a few superpowers with starships. Were ordinary people even qualified to hitch a ride? Of course not. However, it was not only forces at the heavenly body tier that possessed starships. Merchant groups also possessed starships. Some caravans did interstellar business, traveling back and forth between different large planets, transporting supplies and selling specialties from other planets. The profits were huge. Of course, as mentioned before, interstellar travel was too time-consuming, and they might encounter unpredictable cosmic storms. If that happened, they would be buried in the darkness of the universe, forever dying in a foreign land. Merchant groups naturally had a keen sense of smell, and they immediately opened up a new route to that large tomb. However, as for the tickets, each ticket cost 10,000 true origin stones, which was enough to make the majority of people shrink back. Even so, the supply of tickets could not keep up with the demand, and they were instantly sold out. One had to realize that even the Empress, the 7 generals, and the left and right ministers were actively preparing to enter the galaxy, which showed how astonishing this fateful opportunity was. Ling Han took 2 tickets, one for himself and one for Shui Yinyu. Of course, he was going to bring the Rain Emperor and the others with him, but they would stay in the Black Tower first, and they would move according to the situation when they arrived at that large tomb. One after another, the starships streaked across the sky. Not only the chaotic star's majestic empire, but the superpowers of the other 2 majestic empires had also joined in this expedition. Of course, each majestic empire would still leave behind a few elites to oversee the expedition. For example, the chaotic star's majestic empire had the 9 kings. Ling Han's ship would only depart in a few days. Thus, he decided to pay a visit to Old Man Su first. This was something that he had decided long ago. However, it just so happened that he had been interrupted by Jin Zhihui's arrival. Later on, he had been upgrading his divine demon sword, and then crazily concocting alchemical pills, which had ruined his plans. When he arrived at the library, it was no longer as lively as it had been in the past. It was cold and quiet. Presumably, the majority of people were trying their best to obtain a ticket to enter the galaxy. Those that hadn't left yet should also be making preparations, so how would they have the time to come to the library? Senior. Ling Han walked over, and respectfully bowed to Old Man Su. He owed this old man far too many favors. The 7 kills subduing soul technique, the universal 8 desolation technique. Which one of them wasn't a supreme secret technique? Even a master and disciple might not be willing to teach these techniques, but Old Man Su had taught them to him in exchange for a promise from him. Old Man Su was dozing off. Hearing this, he opened his eyes and looked him over. He couldn't help but reveal an expression of surprise, and said, "How did your cultivation level advance so quickly?" Although Ling Han didn't know how strong Old Man Su was, he firmly believed that the other's cultivation level was definitely unfathomable. Thus, it wasn't at all strange that he could see through his cultivation level with a glance. He smiled and said, "I had a little fortuitous encounter." Old Man Su didn't ask what kind of fortuitous encounter it was. His expression became solemn, and he said, "Brat, don't pursue cultivation level too much. If you want to construct the Supreme Tao Pagoda, you have to take every step solidly. Don't be greedy and advance rashly." Chapter 1094. Senior, there are prerequisites to surpass a few stars in battle. Ling Han thought for a moment. For example, I have grasped the 7 kills subduing soul technique. If I encounter someone 9 stars above me, it will be first. First doesn't cultivate a divine sense defense technique, so if I use the 7 kills subduing soul technique to suppress and lower first battle prowess, I have at least a 50% chance of winning. In that case, I have battle prowess surpassing 9 stars. But if I encounter another person, he is only 8 stars above me in battle prowess, but he has cultivated a divine sense defense technique, so it is very likely that I will lose. Then my battle prowess is below 8 stars. But because B doesn't cultivate a divine sense attack technique, he naturally can't be first's match. This is strange. I can defeat first, first can defeat second, and second can defeat me. I really don't know how to calculate this battle prowess. Old Man Su laughed loudly and said, not bad, not bad. You've already thought of this problem. Actually, just like how Shattering Void Tier is measured by power, Immortal level battle prowess is also built on power. After all, power is the foundation. How many stars genius refers to power, and not battle prowess. Of course, powerful power doesn't necessarily guarantee victory. This is also very normal. Thus, the number of stars genius is only a measure of one's battle prowess from the perspective of power, but it is the most important data. Without power, everything is useless. Ling Han nodded. That was indeed the case. Because the two of them had the same power, they cultivated different secret techniques, and the power was different, causing a clear gap between their power. This was not a matter of genius or hard work, but completely because they cultivated different secret techniques. Then, according to this, he was a 5-star genius. However, this was not his limit. He discovered that his power was still growing beyond his cultivation level, and could possibly reach the level of 6 stars. You reach the power of 20 stars in the Shattering Void tier, which means that you have cultivated to perfection in your previous cultivation levels. Otherwise, it would be impossible for you to reach the power of 20 stars, Old Man Su continued. However, if you cultivate to the peak of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier like this, your power can at most surpass 6 stars. 6 stars, wasn't that awesome enough? 5-star geniuses only existed in the legends. In fact, this might even be due to the fact that some secret arts were mixed in, and they might not necessarily be able to reach that level. Haha, young man, the vastness of the universe is far beyond your imagination. In the immortal realm, there is no lack of geniuses. Old Man Su shook his head. When I was young, this old man had traveled extensively and seen many geniuses. Only now do I realize that I have always been a frog in a well. Ling Han said solemnly, please teach me, senior. Old Man Su revealed a satisfied smile. This young man was neither arrogant nor rash. No wonder he could walk so fast and so far. He revealed a look of reminiscence and said after a long time, the limit of martial art should be 10 stars. Ling Han almost choked on his saliva. 5 stars only existed in legends, and now the limit was actually 10 stars. Furthermore, the 10 stars that Old Man Su mentioned were definitely 10 stars in terms of power, and not some secret technique that could increase one's battle prowess. Is it possible 10 stars? He was already very impressive, having cultivated each cultivation level to a perfect level. However, Old Man Su had also said that he could only reach 6 stars at most, which was close to half the distance to 10 stars. Only 10-star geniuses can surpass one major level in battle, Old Man Su said slowly. Even 9-star geniuses can only look up to this chasm. Even if you're at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier, you can only lower your head in front of someone at the early stage of the low extreme of the Sun Moon tier. Ling Han couldn't help but feel excited. He had never heard of a Mountain River tier cultivator being able to overpower a Sun Moon tier cultivator. However, if he could become a 10-star genius, he would be able to turn the impossible into the possible. Of course, this was under the premise that he had to be at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Mountain River tier, and his opponent was at the low extreme of the Sun Moon tier. Otherwise, even becoming a 10-star genius would be pointless. But senior, you also said that even if I cultivated each cultivation level to a perfect level, I could only reach the power of 6 stars, Ling Han said in confusion. Wasn't this a problem that couldn't be solved? Old Man Su chuckled and said, young man, be patient. He stood up and said, come with me for a walk. The two of them walked into the dense forest beside the lake, and Old Man Su said, do you know that the so-called consummate level of the Mountain River tier isn't actually consummate level? Ling Han's heart instantly trembled. Not consummate level. The true pinnacle of the Mountain River tier is 5 mountain rivers, not 4. Old Man Su finally said something that was earth-shattering. Ling Han's mouth gaped open. He was truly astonished. For mountain river tiers, this was the publicly acknowledged ironclad rule of martial art. Everyone cultivated this way, and after forming 4 mountain rivers, they could begin to forge the sun and moon, advancing to the next cultivation level. Now, however, he was told that he could actually form a 5th mountain river. Could he form a 6th or a 7th mountain river? Old Man Su shook his head. and said 5 mountain rivers is the true pinnacle. It's impossible to form any more. This is equivalent to letting you cultivate to another cultivation level, and it's also the only possibility for you to become a 10-star genius. Ling Han was confused again and asked, then from 6 stars to 10 stars wouldn't there be a gap? Where did the 7, 8, and 9 stars go? Old Man Su laughed loudly and said, do you think that after forming the 5th mountain river, you will definitely be able to reach the pinnacle? Some people have only formed a mountain, and though some have formed a mountain river, they have not reached perfection. Thus there are 7, 8, and 9-star geniuses. So that's how it is. Ling Han faltered and said, going by that logic, sun-moon tier cultivators can also form 5 suns and moons, and heavenly body tier cultivators can form 5 heavenly bodies. Then shouldn't there be 11 and 12-star geniuses? Old Man Su chuckled and said, however, there's one thing you're wrong about. He raised a finger and said, only by cultivating to the true pinnacle of each cultivation level can you maintain the power of 10 stars. Otherwise, if you don't reach perfection in a cultivation level, your power will drop, and you'll become 9 stars, 8 stars, or 7 stars. Ling Han gave no. So it was so difficult to maintain the power of 10 stars. One had to cultivate to the pinnacle of each cultivation level. Senior, have you seen a 10-star genius before? He asked. A ferocious glint suddenly burst out of Old Man Su's eyes, and his face trembled slightly. After a long while he finally calmed down and said, this old man hasn't seen one with my own eyes, but I've heard that there are a few prodigies who are known as young king tiers. They are truly invincible in their own cultivation level. Ling Han was stunned. Not only did there exist, there were quite a few of them. How could this be possible? One had to know that if one wanted to reach the power of 20 stars of Shattering Void tier, they had to be rewarded by the heaven and earth. Otherwise, they could only reach 17 stars. The last 3 stars belonged to the forbidden level. Old Man Su saw through his confusion, and said with a smile, do you think it's very difficult for the great elites of the immortal realm to send their clansmen into a small world and have them open the sky? Chapter 1096. In the galaxy, it was basically impossible for them to cultivate because there was no spiritual chi in the galaxy. They could only rely on true origin stones to absorb energy and alchemical pills, which was even more extravagant. However, Ling Han was an exception. There were too many people here, so no one would notice if a few disappeared. Thus, he could enter the Black Tower at any time and cultivate under the reincarnation tree. This was also what the Rain Emperor and the others were doing. They used true origin stones to absorb energy and swallowed alchemical pills to speed up their cultivation. Because of the existence of the reincarnation tree, they didn't have to worry about any problems with this kind of rapid growth. Ling Han mainly refined pills. Only with money could he buy godly metal and raise the level of his divine demon sword. Lacking money seemed to be an eternal problem. However, he clearly wasn't cultivating, yet his improvement was the fastest among them. It couldn't be helped. After all, there was a wisp of essence of a demon master in his body that constantly transmitted power of essence to him. Even when he was sleeping, his cultivation level was still rising. As long as he spent some time comprehending Tao under the reincarnation tree every day, he would be able to make his cultivation level match his temperament, and there wouldn't be any hiccups. In another month or so, he would reach the middle stage of the high extreme. Time passed quietly, and the chaotic chi at the entrance gradually disappeared, revealing the entrance to an abyss. It looked like a passageway from afar, but in reality it was astonishingly large. It was like an ocean, and even starships could easily enter it. It was just that compared to this large tomb it seemed small. The great elites did many tests and tried to use unmanned starships to pass through. After a few attempts they finally confirmed that they could enter. Instantly, one starship after another sailed toward the entrance. The city-sized starships that sailed into the entrance were like ants crawling into a cup. The difference was just this great. Everyone was filled with anticipation. To build a tomb in the starry sky and use a planet as a tomb, just what kind of great character was buried here? However, Ling Han sighed with emotion. So what if he was at the Genesis tier? Didn't his life still come to an end? In the end, his great achievements would still turn to dust. Was there really an eternal existence in this world? As he pondered this, The starship had already sailed into the entrance. It was dark inside, and only the light emitted by the starship illuminated a small space nearby. He immediately felt a soft body lean over. It was Shui Yinyu. Ling Han reached out and embraced the seductive beauty, saying, "Don't worry, I'm here." Shui Yinyu nodded. Actually, she rarely went out to train. In front of such a grand sight, she felt incredibly small and insignificant. The starship continued onward, and after traveling for half a day, a continent appeared in front of them. It was very strange for a continent to appear within the burial mound, but since this might be the tomb of some unparalleled expert, there was nothing strange about this. Almighty experts naturally had their own methods. The starships that had arrived earlier had already docked and were lined up neatly. Many people had disembarked and were currently exploring this continent. After arriving here, there was a faint light in the surroundings, enough for a deity to see clearly. There's actually air here. Ling Han took a deep breath. Although he did not need to breathe, he would still breathe out of habit. It was not necessary, but it made him feel much more comfortable. Be careful. Shui Yinyu pursed her lips. They just happened to pass by a starship that had a flag on it, on which the character Zhao was written. Great General Zhao's starship, and Zhao Luan had just disembarked. He was following behind a tall man, his expression incredibly respectful. Didn't they say that this great general was heavily injured? Why did he come out so quickly? Come, the temptation of this burial mound was too great. Even great General Zhao, who was recuperating, could not resist coming out. Ling Han nodded. Here Zhao Luan was even more unbridled. If they met alone, Ling Han did not believe that great General Zhao would be polite to him. After all, he had slapped Zhao Luan's face time and time again. And this great general only had Zhao Luan as his only son. It would be strange if he was not angry. The starship stopped and everyone disembarked, all of them impatiently. However, when everyone disembarked, the starship immediately returned. What a joke! Who knew how many people were still waiting to come over to the joint peace planet? Naturally, they had to go and pull a few more starships and earn as much as they could. Furthermore, they were not selling return tickets but one-way tickets. If they wanted to return to the joint peace planet, they'd have to continue paying. Ling Han tried to determine the direction, but in this place, directions did not have much meaning. They were all relative. The spiritual chi here is thin, and completely unsuitable for cultivation, but there is life essence surging, so it can be said to be a holy land for cultivation. It's very strange, Ling Han said strangely. How do we go? Shui Yinyu asked. Let's go to a place with no people first, and let Big Brother and the others come out. Ling Han tried to determine the direction. Even though there were many people who had entered this place, because this continent was larger, it was not conspicuous that so many people were placed here. The two of them advanced, and Ling Han was just about to let Feng Peyun and the others out, yet he frowned and retreated. You guys have been following us for quite a while, Ling Han said calmly. Behind them, 4 men had appeared at some point. They looked to be in their 30s, and were at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. However, after advancing into the immortal level, one's appearance could no longer be used to determine one's age. Their vitality was flourishing, and they were almost in the prime of their life. They should be more than 200,000 years old. Brat, you can scram now. As for this beauty, he will take good care of her. The 4 of them laughed loudly. Ling Han shook his head. There were really scum everywhere. They had just entered this large tomb, and they had already encountered 4 perverts. Scram! Fuck, I've been restrained on the ship for a few days, and now it's this beauty. I can't bear it no matter what. Third brother, you can't change this bad habit of yours. If it's really urgent, you can fuck this brat's bottom. Otherwise, you'll be ranked 3rd. When Big Brother and I have our fun, won't you explode? Scram, I'm not gay. The 4 men had no qualms, and their mouths were full of vulgarities. In their eyes, one of Ling Han was at the high extreme of the mountain river tier, and the other was only at the medium extreme. They could easily suppress either one of them. Boss, this brat seems to be unwilling to give in. Then let's kill him. This girl is really sexy, I can't hold back anymore. The 4 men all moved. They clearly had an advantage in cultivation level, yet they still wanted to gang up on Ling Han. It was clear that they were already used to this. Rules and whatnot were fake, and quickly killing their opponents was the way to go. Ling Han humphed, and the divine demon sword was already drawn. Sword ray flashed, and it flew toward the four men. Yeah. The four men all exclaimed in surprise. They had not thought that Ling Han was actually so powerful. They felt that he was not someone to be trifled with the moment he moved. However, that was all. After all, he was only at the high extreme. Humph, your cultivation level is so much higher, yet you still want to win by relying on numbers. How shameless are you? An arrogant voice rang out, and they saw a young man stride over. He had a head of long green hair, and there was divine light intertwining around his body. There were also over 10 young men behind him, and they all looked at him respectfully. It was clear that this green-haired young man was the leader of this group. Chapter 1097. A large man turned around and shouted at the green-haired young man, "Who do you think you are? How dare you meddle in my business? How dare you speak to young Master Wuck like this?" A young man wielding a spear leaped out from the group of youths. "I'll send you on your way." He raised his spear and attacked. The large man hurriedly raised his saber to parry. Ding ding ding. After a few exchanges, his expression changed drastically. Though they were both at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier, his battle prowess was much weaker than his opponent's, and he was immediately at a disadvantage. Moreover, his opponent's spear was deadly, and his killing intent was boiling. He could clearly feel the threat of death. So powerful. He was shocked and hurriedly roared. He began to fight with all his might. Flashes of divine light shot out from his body, and his body suddenly expanded a few times, turning into a 9-meter-tall giant. Pooh, his palm was pierced by a spear, but it was as if he had no blood in his body. This spear didn't even cause a drop of blood, and it was as if he didn't feel any pain. He raised his saber with his other hand, and slashed at the spear-wielding man. The spear-wielding man couldn't help but be shocked. He hurriedly flicked his spear, and flipped his opponent away, dispersing the might of this attack. Then he revealed an expression of realization, and said, "You didn't enlarge your body, but merely filled it up. It looks big, but it's actually not an extension of your body. Thus, you were unaffected by my spear, and didn't even bleed. So what if you know?" The large man smirked coldly. "My body is so big now, and you still want to hit my vitals? Do you know where my vitals are?" "Haha, I don't need to know where your vitals are. Under my cold frost spear, your only fate is death." The spear-wielding man activated the spear in his hand. Instantly, multiple divine patterns bloomed, and endless cold air circulated, as if to turn the surroundings into an ice cave. The large man's teeth involuntarily chattered, and shock appeared in his eyes. Level 4 God Tool. This spear-wielding man was obviously under the command of the green-haired youth, but a servant could possess a level 4 God Tool? What kind of concept was this? This group of youths was incredible, and their background must be astonishing. "Haha, it's just a misunderstanding," another man said. "Since these two are your friends, please forgive us for being rash." The spear-wielding man turned his head to look at the green-haired youth. The green-haired youth merely smiled coldly and said, "You dare to offend a beauty, and you still want to live?" The green-haired youth immediately understood what the green-haired youth meant, and his spear swept towards the four men. Right now, he was incredibly powerful. His spear unleashed its might, transforming the surroundings into a world of ice and snow. This might had even surpassed the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier, and added with his own battle prowess, it was equivalent to two elites joining forces. Even though it was 1 against 4, he still had the upper hand. It looked like he would be able to kill all 4 of them in just a few moves. Ling Han could not help but nod. It was very difficult for a martial artist to have a battle prowess of 1 star, but it was different for a divine weapon. This was because it could be nurtured by a powerhouse and then bestowed to a descendant. It was completely capable of surpassing 4 or 5 stars. He was even more expectant. When the divine demon sword caught up to his cultivation level, how astonishing would its might be? It was comparable to divine metal, so it definitely wasn't as simple as just possessing the ability to grow. Not long after, the 4 men had all been slaughtered. The spear-wielding man put away his weapon and respectfully returned to stand behind the green-haired young man. This was astonishing. One had to realize that this spear-wielding man's battle prowess was extremely astonishing, and he was completely capable of standing on his own. Now, however, he was like a servant. The green-haired young man walked over and flashed a charming smile at Shui Yinyu. He said, "Miss, I've startled you." Ling Han shook his head in his mind. It seemed that he had gained another rival in love. This wife of his was really a super femme fatale. Wherever she went, there would be people hitting on her, and all of them were of high status. Previously, it had been Zhao Luan, and now it was a green-haired man. Most likely, his background was no weaker than Zhao Luan's. "Please speak if you want to speak, but don't come so close." Ling Han stretched out a hand to block. "How dare you?" The spear-wielding man immediately jumped out, his spear drawn again, and pointed it directly at Ling Han. "Zhang-sun, don't be so agitated." The green-haired young man smiled faintly and lightly pressed down on the spear-wielding man's spear. "I am Xiao Wuk, and I come from the tyrannical Xiao majestic empire of the Great Length Star." The spear-wielding man immediately put away his spear and respectfully said, "Please forgive my rudeness, young master." Xiao Wuk merely waved his hand and said to Ling Han and Shui Yinyu, "How should I address the two of you?" "Ling Han, Shui Yinyu, my wife." Ling Han replied with a smile. Xiao Wuk's expression involuntarily froze, and a dark expression appeared on his face. It wasn't that he hadn't seen beauties before, but this was the first time he had seen such a seductive beauty like Shui Yinyu. Adoration and possessiveness immediately welled up in his heart upon seeing her. However, she was already taken. He swept his gaze over Ling Han, and a mocking expression involuntarily appeared on his face. How could a nobody like him be worthy of such a beauty? He chuckled coldly. Anyone with eyes would be able to tell who was better between him and Ling Han. He was naturally filled with confidence regarding this. He was the 67th son of the current emperor of the tyrannical Summer Majestic Empire, as well as the youngest son. However, he was also the most outstanding descendant. He was only 507 years old, yet he had already reached the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. More importantly, he had been sent into a small world when he was over 40 years old, and he had successfully opened the sky there, cultivating every cultivation level to perfection. He was filled with ambition, and he wanted to become the most powerful prodigy in history. The situation here is unknown, and it could be extremely dangerous. Why don't we travel together? That way we can look after each other, he suggested with a smile. Shui Yinyu shook her head and said, "We've only met by chance, so there's no need for that." She naturally knew what he was thinking, but her heart was already tied to Ling Han, so she naturally didn't want to cause any trouble. The two of them started to walk away, yet the spear-wielding man immediately stepped forward and blocked their path. "What are you doing, Zhang-sun?" Xiao Wuk shouted coldly. The spear-wielding man hurriedly took a step back and knelt down on one knee saying, "I was too rash." A confident smile appeared on Xiao Wuk's face, and he said, "Miss Shui, we'll meet again." Shui Yinyu didn't reply, and Ling Han merely extended a hand and shook it, not even turning his head around. "Young master?" The spear-wielding man scooted over. He was slightly confused. Young master clearly liked this woman, so why didn't he just make her stay? With young master's identity, status, and talent in martial art, what kind of woman wouldn't throw herself at him? "You don't understand," Xiao Wuk said with a smile, a meaningful expression on his face. What was the point of a woman that he could obtain too easily? Did he lack beautiful women? However, a woman as charming as Shui Yinyu was like a fine wine that needed to be savored slowly. Not only did he want to obtain her body, but he also wanted to obtain her heart. Thus, he naturally didn't need to be overly hasty. "We'll meet again by chance." He waved his hand and said, "Follow me." Chapter 1098. Ling Han and Shui Yinyu walked for a distance, and after confirming that there was no one nearby, he waved his hand, and the Rain Emperor and the others appeared from the Black Tower. However, not everyone like Qin Yi, Zhu Wujiu, and the other followers still stayed in the Black Tower to cultivate. Their present cultivation level was still too low, and staying here would not bring about the effect of training, so it was naturally better to spend their energy on cultivation. Only 5 people came out: Feng Peyun, the Rain Emperor, Mu Rongqing, Helian Tianyun, and Ding Ping. The Azura Demon Emperor was now in the form of a puppet wolf, and couldn't be counted as human. Moreover, he was originally a creature of the netherworld, and couldn't be considered human. This is the large tomb in the galaxy? The Rain Emperor and the others were all surprised. This place didn't seem to be different from the Joint Peace Planet, just that the spiritual chi was a bit weaker, but the life essence was astonishingly abundant. Ling Han nodded. This is the internal space of the large tomb, and it is indeed a bit ridiculously large. Since we're here, let's split up. The Rain Emperor's eyes flashed, filled with fighting spirit. Feng Peyun and Mu Rongqing both nodded. Let's go together so we can look after each other. Ling Han felt that this place was dangerous, and there were too many elites here. Although the Rain Emperor and the others had advanced into the immortal level and had the ability to surpass their cultivation level, there were still a lot of people who could suppress them. Fourth brother, we're all suitable for fighting, and cultivating blindly isn't our path, Feng Peyun said with a smile. Ling Han was startled and slowly nodded. His 3 brothers were all top-notch geniuses, especially the Rain Emperor, who was an overlord of a generation. Such a person wouldn't rely on the protection of others. They were all proud people, and naturally had their own paths to walk. All right, then we'll meet at the exit in the future. Ling Han wasn't a pretentious person. Fourth brother, be careful, Feng Peyun and the others said, and then left. They ran so fast. Helian Tianyun scratched his head. Since they've all left, I'd be too embarrassed to stay. Bratling, will meet again in the future. He also found a different direction and floated away. Master. Ding Ping was eager to try. Ling Han couldn't help but roll his eyes. You? Since you've broken through to the deity level first, I can allow you to go out and train. But for now, you should just stay here obediently. Yes. Ding Ping immediately became listless. The 3 of them also chose a direction to go. This was a plain, and there were no obvious landmarks around to guide them, so they just had to not turn back. This place was desolate. There was not a single living creature on the plains. Not only were there no rats and rabbits, but even a blade of grass did not grow here. It was as if this was a barren land. It was quite strange. Even though there was no spiritual energy here, ordinary creatures didn't need spiritual energy. Moreover, the life essence here rushed into the heavens, so the plants should be lush and the animals should be robust. How could this place become a land of death? They continued forward for almost a day. Ling Han was the first to let out a cry of surprise. He saw that there was a huge black mass of people in front of him, like an army formation. Just the row that he had arrived in numbered in the thousands, and if there were a few more rows, there would be tens of thousands of people. Master, what's wrong? Ding Ping asked hurriedly. Ling Han activated the Eye of Truth, and the astonishment on his face involuntarily became more intense because those were not real people, but stone statues. He said, walk faster. Oh. Ding Ping nodded hurriedly, but he was only in the shattering void tier. So how could he compete with Ling Han and Shui Yinyu in speed? Instantly, he was kicked in the butt by Ling Han impatiently. He was sent flying towards that group of stone statues. Master! He screamed. Shui Yinyu couldn't help but roll her eyes at Ling Han. Other people would treat such a genius disciple like a treasure, but Ling Han was good, always thinking of ways to torment this disciple. However, Ding Ping's speed of improvement was also obvious to all. If she didn't hurry, it was very possible that she would be surpassed by him. Meanwhile, Ling Han laughed loudly. As he grabbed Shui Yinyu and hurried, he said, Disciple, Master is testing your reaction speed. And the result is very disappointing. Pung! Ding Ping fell head first, and directly plunged into the soil. He pulled his head out, and saw that he had already landed in front of a black mass of soldiers. This gave him a great fright, and he hurriedly put on a vigilant expression. Then he discovered that these were only stone statues. At this time, Ling Han and Shui Yinyu had also arrived, and the Azura Demon Emperor followed behind them. Ling Han gazed around and said in surprise, This stone statue formation has at least 1 million. Are these burial goods? Shui Yinyu asked curiously. Although 1,000,000 stone statues was very astonishing, the great elites buried here were at least eternal river tier, so those 1,000,000 stone statues were too ordinary. Probably, with 1,000,000 people accompanying him, he wouldn't be lonely in the afterlife. Ling Han shook his head. Sigh, even if he is invincible in the immortal Tao, he will eventually turn to dust. Is there really no one who can be eternal and indestructible? Although the lifespan of Genesis tiers was ridiculously long, it was also limited, at most 4 billion years. This was indeed a terrifying number, but it was ultimately not eternal. There would always be a day when an era would end. There's another stone tablet here. They walked a distance to the left, and saw a stone tablet that was 9 meters tall erected in front of the stone statue formation. There were still words on it, but this time they were no longer indistinct but clear. Those who are confident of being invincible can barge through the formation, Ling Han read. Take a detour or barge through the formation? Shui Yinyu asked. They didn't know what this stone statue formation was, so it was better not to rashly take risks. Ling Han was just about to speak but faltered and said, "There's movement in front." They all leaped up and saw that several thousand meters to their left, a group of people had barged into the stone statue formation, and these originally rigid stone statues actually moved and began to attack that group of people. Now both sides were fighting fiercely. Puppet! Ling Han and Shui Yinyu blurted out. They were really no stranger to these things now. However, there had only been 1,000 puppets on Earth's core island, and most of them were only at the low extreme of the mountain river tier. Now, however, the puppets here were all at the early stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier, and their battle prowess was quite astonishing. The group of people weren't powerful either, and were all beaten out in a short while. All of them were bruised, and their bodies were covered in wounds. Let's take a detour, one person said. And this suggestion received the agreement of the others. They all walked around the stone statues. This stone statue formation was only about 1 kilometer wide, but it was extremely deep. Hence, it was possible that there were more than 1,000,000 of them. When these people passed by Ling Han's group of 3, they couldn't help but glance at Shui Yinyu's face. Some of them seemed to want to cause trouble, but after glancing behind them, they hurriedly sped up and hurriedly left. Ling Han turned around and saw that Xiao Wuk and his group were calmly walking over. The group of people from before was probably afraid of Xiao Wuk and his group. He, as expected, were fated to meet again, Xiao Wuk said with a smile. He was a little curious. There had clearly only been Ling Han and Shui Yinyu previously, so why was there another shattering void tier cultivator and a puppet wolf now? Chapter 1100. Xiao, the stone statue beside Ling Han, immediately recovered from its stillness and punched fiercely at Ling Han. Ling Han also clenched his fist and counterattacked. This stone statue immediately stumbled back. Its power was average and it was at the early stage of the consummate level. However, Ling Han's power could surpass 5 stars now, and the power of this punch was at the late stage of the consummate level. Naturally, it was a crushing advantage. However, more stone statues recovered and attacked Ling Han. Some leaped high into the air, and some charged at Ling Han. Their attacks were ruthless, and they showed no mercy. This was also the reason why Ling Han didn't let Shui Yinyu and Ding Ping come. If they did, they would really be killed with a single strike. Even if they were no match for the stone statues, and wanted to give up halfway, they would need to be extremely powerful. They couldn't retreat just because they wanted to. Within the stone statue formation, there was blood, severed limbs, and even corpses. Ling Han arrived. There were still many super prodigies here, and a few of them weren't weaker than Xiao Wuk. They only used one hand to face the stone statues, appearing very calm. He believed that the number of prodigies that entered the large tomb this time was far less than this number. After all, not all prodigies were traveling alone, or with a group of weaklings or with their seniors. It was also possible that they were traveling alone, and had Sun-Moon tier protectors hiding in the shadows. Once Sun-Moon tier or Heavenly Body tier elites appeared, they naturally wouldn't appear here. Perhaps there were Sun-Moon tier or even Heavenly Body tier puppets, but those were no match for Mountain River tier prodigies, and they could only watch from the sidelines. The prodigies were also competing. After this exploration of the large tomb, It would naturally be the major event of the Majestic Heaven sect accepting disciples. Perhaps many people here would become new disciples of the Majestic Heaven sect, and they would become competitors. Thus they were already competing now. Ling Han naturally wasn't eye-catching. Although he was also advancing, it wasn't easy. After all, his cultivation level was too low. This kind of competition attracted the attention of many people, and they all watched from both sides. They wanted to know how many people could successfully pass the test, and if there were, who would be first. With this comparison, the fighting spirit of the prodigies was naturally even more aroused. Of course, it was not only the young prodigies who were participating. The older generation of mountain river tier cultivators were not to be outdone, and also joined in the competition. Among them, there were indeed a few who were extremely powerful. Although they hadn't advanced to the Sun Moon tier, they had really tempered themselves too well at this cultivation level, and used all kinds of methods to increase their battle prowess. Of course, there was no rule prohibiting the use of divine items here. Ling Han saw an elder take out a tortoise shell. There were several dozen divine patterns on the shell, and they were currently glowing, blocking countless attacks for him. This was the 8 immortals crossing the sea, each displaying their abilities. Those with strength relied on their strength, those with divine artifacts relied on their divine artifacts, and those without anything could only retreat to avoid dying in vain. At the front, Xiao Wuck was still in the lead. However, the people behind him had already closed the gap between them, yet none of them dared to overtake him. The leader was under the greatest pressure. Hence, under the premise that the finish line was still far away, the geniuses chose to follow up and not rush to surpass it. The current first place holder is Xiao Wuck. Who's Xiao Wuck? He's the prince of the tyrannical Summer Empire, and also the #1 prodigy of the Great Length planet. It's said that the tyrannical Summer Emperor specially sent him into a small world, where he split open the sky and split open the earth. He received the blessing of heaven and earth, and in the future, not only will he definitely reach the heavenly body tier, but he might even become a legendary 5-star genius. 5-star genius? TSK TSK TSK. No wonder he can take the lead. He'll definitely win. Who can compete with him? Moreover, they actually specially left a small world for him to open up. This is truly astonishing. However, don't underestimate the others. The current second place holder is Xiao Sisi, the little princess of the Thousand Frost Majestic Empire on the South Plentiful planet. She's also an exceptional genius, and has opened up a small world before. Fuck, having a good father is really too much of an advantage. The third person is Su Jing, a brilliant disciple of the Tai Lu sect. His strength is unfathomable. The fourth person, Duan, is also not simple. Among the young geniuses, these 4 people were the most dazzling and eye-catching, displaying strength that far surpassed that of their peers. This was also related to the fact that they had come by opening up the sky, so their starting point was higher than the others. Even if they could not form 5 mountains and rivers, merely their strength alone could surpass 6 stars. This was too astonishing. Even Ling Han could not possibly face these 4 people head-on. The 4 of them formed the first echelon, and there was no 5th person that could stand side by side with them. Furthermore, the gap between them was continuously widening. The second echelon consisted of the geniuses 1 level lower, as well as the mountain river tier of the older generation. For example, the person who had used the tortoise shell. Relying on the protection of this god tool, he was continuously advancing. And this god tool also caused others to be envious. It could withstand so many attacks from those at the consummate level of the mountain river tier without being damaged. Who would not want to possess it? The third echelon consisted of geniuses that were slightly weaker. They possessed battle prowess of about 3 stars, but all of them were at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Otherwise, there was no way that they could have reached this step, and they would have long since been defeated. Then there was the 4th echelon. They all possessed battle prowess of about 2 stars, and were similarly at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Those behind them could not even be considered to be in the 5th echelon because they had all just entered. Those who were weaker would very quickly be swept out. Ling Han was currently in the 4th echelon. He was not in a hurry and walked slowly. He was using these puppets to train his battle prowess. Like the Rain Emperor Feng Puyun and the others, he was also the type that used battle to nurture his battle prowess. However, his cultivation level had risen too quickly recently. Though his mental state could keep up, his actual battle experience was a little lacking. Thus, these almost endless puppet formations were really a very good opportunity for him to train. If one looked closely, they would realize that Ling Han was not just charging through the formations. Moreover, every stone statue that he knocked down was on the verge of collapse. If it were not for the fact that there was a special power here that could allow damaged stone statues to quickly recover, it was guaranteed that every stone statue that Ling Han had knocked down would have been completely destroyed. After advancing for who knew how long, Ling Han suddenly discovered that there was an additional indescribable power in the fists of the stone statues. When these fists landed on his body, he actually felt a faint pain. One had to realize that Ling Han's physique was on par with level 4 godly metal. How could the power of the early stage of the consummate level possibly hurt him? Inconceivable. Ling Han couldn't help but notice that a divine pattern had appeared on the fist of the stone statue, and it was glowing at some unknown time. It was precisely this divine pattern that had unleashed its might, causing the attacks of the stone statues to become even more powerful. There was clearly no increase in power, yet the threat they posed had increased greatly. Pung 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 pung. A flurry of attacks. In the last 3 echelons there were people screaming in agony. After a few attacks, they were beaten into a bloody pulp. Many people could not hold on any longer, and hurriedly charged to the sides. However, some people succeeded while others were knocked down by the flurry of fists. Then they were unable to climb back up, and became a bloody pulp of corpses. Only now did the people in the surroundings realize that the power of the stone statue formation had increased. Chapter 1101. We've only walked 1/10 of the way, and these puppets have actually become more powerful. How can we pass? That's right. Perhaps they'll become even stronger if we walk a bit further. That's right. Perhaps they'll become even stronger if we walk a bit further. That's simply asking for too much. Everyone shook their heads, feeling that this was a test that could not be passed. The 4 echelons were still advancing, but it could be seen that the 4th echelon, which originally had the largest number of people, rapidly decreased after entering this possible second stage, becoming one of the echelons with the smallest number of people. There were only a few more people than the 1st echelon. Everyone was surprised. With the number of people decreasing, the remaining few people naturally became eye-catching, and Ling Han immediately stood out. This is unbelievable. There's actually someone in the high extreme of the mountain river tier. He hasn't formed his 3rd river yet, so he obviously hasn't reached the late stage of the high extreme. He can still make it here. This is too unreasonable. Is he a monster? He probably has some kind of treasure on him that can protect him and not be injured. Everyone nodded. Otherwise, so what if you were a prodigy? After all, the difference in cultivation level was too big. Moreover, the attacks of the puppets here were endless, as if they would never stop. How could a cultivator in the high extreme of the mountain river tier have so much origin power to expend? However, they didn't know that Ling Han also cultivated body arts, and his stamina would only need time to recover. This was different from origin power. Every time they advanced, some people would be eliminated. At first, there were thousands of people advancing majestically, but now this number had sharply decreased to several hundred. Those who were eliminated were basically those in the 4th echelon. Some people escaped, but a considerable number were also killed by the stone statues. Now, the 2nd and 3rd echelons had the largest number of people. The 2nd echelon had over 100 people, and the 2nd echelon had over 300 people. Meanwhile, the 1st and 4th echelons only had single-digit numbers. Battle, battle, battle. The bravery of the youths was stimulated, and they also had the pride that belonged to prodigies. Since there was such a test, there would definitely be people who could pass, so why couldn't they? This kind of unwillingness to admit defeat was sometimes a good thing, as it could help cultivators improve, but sometimes it was also a bad thing. Because they refused to retreat, they would forever stay here. About 2 hours later, the 1st echelon had already closed in on 2/10 of the distance. Due to the fact that the combat strength of the stone puppets had increased by a large margin after walking 1/10 of the way, Everyone was prepared to face the sudden increase in strength of the stone puppet. Sure enough, the stone statue's battle prowess increased again when it reached 30%. A second divine sigil appeared on their fists. Ah! The old man who had been holding the turtle shell was the first to suffer. The turtle shell was repeatedly smashed by the stone golems, and the divine runes on it began to glow with an unstable light. Then the turtle shell was smashed into 7 pieces. With this defensive artifact gone, how could the old man resist the stone statue's bombardment? In an instant he was smashed into minced meat. He didn't even have a chance to escape. I'm done playing. In the face of such reality, many geniuses chose to let go of their pride. This was only the 3rd stage, and there were still 7 more stages ahead that would definitely be even more difficult. It was simply impossible to pass through. Was this really something that a mountain river tier cultivator could do? However, everyone immediately turned their eyes to Ling Han. At this moment, apart from him, the 4th echelon had been completely annihilated. They had either been killed or had retreated. However, a cultivator in the high extreme of the mountain river tier was still stubbornly persisting. Who on earth is this guy? That's right. In terms of treasures, he's not the only one with them. However, he's the only one in the high extreme who can persist until here. P-Freak. He's the #1 prodigy of our joint peace planet's chaotic star's majestic empire. He only arrived from a small world 2 years ago. There were people from the chaotic star's majestic empire present, and they revealed Ling Han's identity. What? Everyone exploded with shock, completely unable to believe their eyes. You're joking, right? Before this, when they discovered that Ling Han was only in the high extreme of the mountain river tier, they naturally felt that his cultivation level was too low. He was practically a monster to be able to rampage through the stone statue formation. However, when they heard that Ling Han had only arrived from a small world 2 years ago, their first reaction was that Ling Han's cultivation speed was too fast. In 2 years, he had advanced from the shattering void tier to the high extreme of the mountain river tier? Was this possible? However, there was more than one person from the chaotic star's majestic empire here, and they all voiced their affirmation. This forced the others to believe it even if they didn't want to. What meaning was there in saying this kind of lie? Even if it could scare people temporarily, it would be exposed in the future. But if that was really the case, then this guy was practically inhuman. His cultivation speed was frighteningly fast. The team of more than 400 people had already fallen to less than 200 people. This time, the 3rd echelon was greatly reduced from more than 300 people to just over 30 people. Some people in the 2nd echelon had also given up and some had died. However, there were still more than 100 people. Hey, guess when this high extreme of the mountain river tier will stop? Someone asked curiously. This attracted the enthusiasm of the others, and they all began to make guesses. Unfortunately, there was no one to be the banker at this time. After all, no one had a good reputation that could allow others to place their bets without worry. They all came from over 100 great stars, so who knew each other? Master will definitely be able to walk to the end, Ding Ping said with clenched fists. That's true. Master is wise and mighty, and unparalleled in this world. To say nothing of walking to the end of this small path, even if there were 10 times more people, it would still be a piece of cake, the Azura Demon Emperor said. Shui Yinyu also believed in Ling Han, but when she heard the Azura Demon Emperor's words, she couldn't help but grimace. This guy was flattering for the sake of flattery. He had already reached the level of shamelessness. At this time, even the 1st echelon had slowed down. So what if it was Xiao Wuk and Xiao Sisi? Faced with this endless sea of puppets, they all looked strained. However, there was one person who was faster. Ling Han. He had already caught up to the 3rd echelon, and it was also because of this that the 4th echelon no longer existed. This was because he was the last person. Seeing this, everyone clutched their heads. This was far too ridiculous. Others were all slowing down, yet he could actually still increase his speed. It's not that his speed has decreased, but rather that others have slowed down. He hasn't slowed down, someone said. Everyone was stunned. The pressure was increasing step by step, yet Ling Han was actually still able to maintain his original speed. What kind of concept was this? They were going crazy. How the fuck can you possibly be at the high extreme of the mountain river tier? Indeed, Ling Han didn't feel too much pressure. Up until now, the attacks of the puppets could only hurt him, but they weren't powerful enough to wound him. Moreover, they couldn't even wound him. In that case, Ling Han naturally hadn't used the recovery ability of the indestructible Heaven Scroll. He still had many trump cards. 2 hours later, the first echelon had entered the 4th section. The battle prowess of the stone statues had increased again, and the number of divine patterns on their hands had reached 3. Their power clearly hadn't increased, yet the addition of a single divine pattern had increased their battle prowess by several tens of %. This was far too astonishing. The second echelon began to lose a large number of people. No matter how many people there were, they had an invincible heart and could suppress anyone who came. Therefore, they only treated the other 3 as opponents and never paid attention to the second echelon and below. Were they worthy? Now, however, someone had emerged from the second echelon and was gradually catching up to them. However, this was not the important point. The important point was that this person was actually only at the high extreme of the mountain river tier. If he really caught up to them, how could they endure it? As for Xiao Wuk, his face had already turned green. He hadn't taken Ling Han seriously at all just then, yet Ling Han had caught up to him now. Wasn't this a slap to his face? He was a prodigy, and he had always been the one to slap others in the face. When had he ever been the one to be slapped in the face? He gritted his teeth and forcibly increased his speed. This was a very heavy burden on him. If this was already the 10th stage, then he could just muster up his strength and charge out in a single breath. However, this was only the 5th stage. If he unleashed his full strength here, then he would definitely run out of stamina. It was difficult to say whether he could walk out of this stone statue formation. However, he was even more unable to endure the fact that Ling Han had caught up to him. He knew that Shui Yinyu was definitely watching from the side. His pride and dignity would not allow him to do so. His battle prowess was truly powerful. Golden light radiated from his body, and even his arms had become a faint golden color. It was as if they had been forged from godly metal. He was completely unscathed as he took on the stone statue's attacks head-on. This kind of state naturally couldn't last for long. Thus, Xiao Wuk unleashed his full speed and charged forward. He wanted to take advantage of this invincible state to increase the distance between him and Ling Han. Even if he exited this state later, he would still have enough time to recover. Stupid bird, Ling Han said in his mind. Xiao Wuk was now treating him as a formidable opponent, yet he didn't take him seriously at all. If he didn't form his 5th mountain river and become a 10-star genius, how could he possibly view him as a rival? Although Ling Han hadn't taken this step yet, he firmly believed that he could definitely do it. He had a feeling that this stone statue formation was most likely prepared for 10-star geniuses. After reaching the consummate level of the mountain river tier, every increase in power of 1 star would allow one to pass a stage. 10 stars meant 10 stages. Thus, there shouldn't be anyone here that could pass. Apart from him, he naturally wasn't a 10-star genius. In fact, he was still very far from the consummate level of the mountain river tier. However, who told him to have a powerful physique and freakish recovery ability? Thus, there was a possibility that he could pass. What he was more curious about was whether there would be any rewards for passing this stone statue formation. The 6th stage. The attacks of the stone statues became more and more violent. Power was only a part of battle prowess, and this saying was fully demonstrated here. However, this was also an extremely special situation. After all, cultivators definitely couldn't do this. You're clearly only at the mountain river tier. So how could you possibly comprehend the regulations of the sun moon tier? This isn't a matter of time, but rather a matter of cultivation level. At this stage, there was no need to talk about how many teams there were. After all, there were only 5 people left. Ling Han, Xiao Wuk, Xiao Sisi, Su Jing, and Duan. These were the 5 great geniuses. Who would be the first super genius to be eliminated? Who would last until the end? Who would be able to fight their way out of the stone statue formation? The people outside were all incredibly curious. They could clearly leave first, Yet none of them were willing to do so. They were all waiting here, determined to witness the final moment. The sixth stage was extremely stressful. Even Ling Han was slightly wary of the attack power of the stone statues. As long as they landed a solid punch, even Ling Han would bleed. Even he was feeling this way, so the pressure on the other 4 people was naturally even greater. However, the other 4 people had an advantage in cultivation level. Whether it was in terms of power or battle prowess, they were all far superior to Ling Han. Thus, although their defenses were inferior to Ling Han's, they could make up for it with their powerful attacks. They wouldn't give the stone statues any chance to strike them. The 5 of them were all sweating profusely. Right now, they weren't just competing in terms of power but also willpower. Chapter 1104. Everyone clutched their heads and exclaimed in shock. This was far too frightening. Xiao Wuk and the others were all struggling to move. Yet Ling Han was still accelerating at such a time. Humph! Xiao Wuk clenched his fists, his killing intent boiling. This guy is quite a character. I can make friends with him, Su Jing said calmly. He could naturally sense Xiao Wuk's killing intent toward Ling Han, but he didn't care. He had an invincible heart, and his background was also top-notch, so what need was there for him to fear? I've long heard of Brother Su's great name. It's my honor to meet you today, Xiao Sisi said with a beautiful smile. Although Su Jing's willpower was firm, his heart still fluttered in the face of her beauty. He hurriedly clasped his hands in greeting and said, I've also long heard of Miss Sisi's great name. It's a pity that I've never had the chance to meet you. Barring any accidents, we'll meet again in the majestic heaven sect as fellow disciples, Duan said. His gaze swept over Ling Han, and he flicked his fingers lightly. I wonder how much this guy will grow at that time. Su Jing and Xiao Sisi both nodded, an expression of anticipation on their faces. In terms of battle prowess alone, they were naturally superior to Ling Han. However, that was because Ling Han's cultivation level was far inferior to theirs. Once their cultivation levels were equal, it would probably be difficult to determine who was superior in terms of battle prowess. Even if they were superior, they still couldn't find a way to deal with Ling Han's physique and recovery ability. Su Jing thought for a moment but still shook his head and said, There's really nothing we can do. Unless we can kill him with a single strike, he'll exhaust us to death. He felt that Ling Han's defense was unbreakable. He's just a lowly commoner from a small world. Why is there a need to praise him so highly? Xiao Wuk said, his expression still filled with disdain. Xiao Sisi and the others only smiled faintly and ignored him. Xiao Wuk already hated Ling Han to the bone. With this preconceived notion, how could he make a fair evaluation? Thus, there was no need to pay him any heed. On the other hand, Ling Han's figure was as if he was flying. The destructive ability of these stone statues had already reached the level of 4 stars at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. So long as he was swept by them, Ling Han would definitely be injured, and his injuries would not be light. Therefore, he didn't dare to stop and tried his best to minimize the damage he would receive. But even so, he was still repeatedly punched and was riddled with scars. If it was someone else, they would have died after receiving so many punches. But Ling Han was almost unaffected. If you want to hit me, then hit me. I'll jump around. This caused everyone to be speechless. How could there be such a freakish guy? Were you really a human? Weren't you a puppet forged from godly metal? Stage 9. This was even more terrifying. The destructive power of the stone puppets had increased by another star. When they landed on Ling Han's body, a bloody hole would definitely appear with each punch. Even his godly bones were groaning. The expressions of Xiao Wuk and the others all changed drastically. Their battle prowess was still superior to these puppets, but if they were to be struck by one of these puppets, they would definitely suffer. Other than a freak like Ling Han, most people's attack power was far greater than their defense. Hadn't they heard that attack was the best defense? Right now, with our strength, we can still suppress these puppets, but in the next stage, they didn't continue speaking. In the next stage, just a single puppet would possess the same destructive power as them. Chapter 1105. The 10th Stage. As expected, the destructive power of the stone puppets had reached a level similar to that of Xiao Wuk and the others. This was almost undefeatable. It should be known that in this galaxy, there was no one who had formed the fifth mountain river. Thus, strength surpassing 6 stars was already the strongest, and how many prodigies of this kind would need to split open the sky and split the earth from a small world to come here? Even if Xiao Wuk and the other 3 weren't the only ones, there were probably only a handful of them in total. But now, tens of thousands of such destructive stone statues were bombarding Ling Han. This caused Xiao Wuk and the others to suck in a breath of cold air. If it were them, they would only be able to persist for 1 or 2 breaths under such an encirclement, and if they didn't use their trump cards, they might not even be able to escape alive. Ling Han was finally in trouble. Not only did the stone statue's punch cause blood to spurt from all over his body, but even his god's bones were cracked. They were not broken, but he definitely would not be able to withstand a few more punches. How many statues are there? Pung 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 pung. Punches flew everywhere, and divine patterns bloomed. Pa pa pa. Ling Han's body continuously emitted the sound of bones breaking. Even in such a great battle, it was still clearly audible. This time he definitely won't be able to hold on. Everyone was jealous, especially geniuses. They were confident that they were the best in the world, so they naturally did not want anyone to surpass them. Therefore, even Xiao Sisi and the other 2, who had no grudges with Ling Han, did not wish for Ling Han to be able to clear the stage. It would be a huge blow to their confidence if they could not. Now, with every step Ling Han took, his bones would be broken. How could he possibly pass this last stage? If he tried to be brave, he would only be beaten to a pulp. A cold smile appeared on Xiao Wuk's face. Right now, he truly hoped that Ling Han's willpower would be stronger and allow him to continue onward. That way, he wouldn't have to do anything himself. After all, even he wasn't confident that he could kill Ling Han with his current defenses. Although this was not enough to vent his hatred, with his status, why should he lower himself to the level of such a lowly commoner? It was good that he was dead. Ling Han continued to bleed all the way. His body had already become severely deformed. The attacks that blasted at him were really too concentrated, and even the indestructible Heaven Scroll didn't have enough time to heal his wounds. The second and third wave of attacks had already arrived, causing his wounds to become even more severe. The connection of his godly bones was also disrupted, but it didn't matter. Even if he connected wrongly, he would be immediately interrupted and smashed. He wouldn't be given any time to catch his breath. It's halfway there. Ling Han silently calculated in his heart. He was already halfway through the 10th stage, and this made him feel much more confident. A drop of indestructible true fluid flowed through his body, and his injuries immediately healed completely. He let out a long roar and suddenly sped up. Damn, the people on both sides were dumbfounded. 10,000 curses ran through their minds. Monster, this guy was definitely a monster. You looked like you were about to die, but you suddenly became lively again. Are you deliberately messing with me? Ling Han activated the divine patterns of gravity with all his might. He gave up on all offensive techniques and sprinted at top speed. 6 out of 10, 7, 8, 9 passing was in sight. Everyone's hearts were hanging in suspense. Although Ling Han had exploded once, the attacks of the stone statues here didn't weaken. Very soon, he was beaten into a bloody mess again, and broken bones could be seen clearly. Was he still human? He was practically a pile of rotten flesh. But this pile of rotten flesh was still attacking. His godly bones shone with a dazzling light, and an aura of eternity flowed through them. The last 10 steps charge. Ling Han gritted his teeth. Pung 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 pung. He was being attacked crazily, and he felt as if he was about to die. At this moment he really wanted to hide in the Black Tower, but he had already come this far, so how could he be willing to give up? Fortunately, he had self-crippled in the past few heavenly tribulations, and completely shattered his godly bones. He was already somewhat used to this kind of pain. Otherwise, he really might have fainted from the pain. He burned another drop of indestructible true fluid, but if he used it continuously, even the effects of the indestructible true fluid would decrease sharply. It would only allow him to struggle at death's door. 8 steps, 5 steps, 3 steps. Ling Han gave a long roar and charged out. Wang, the area ahead suddenly darkened and became a land of endless darkness. Ling Han lay on the ground and discovered that the stone statues around him had completely disappeared. However, there was no one else on either side of him either. It was as if he had entered another space after his final leap. A stone tablet appeared. It seemed to be made of white jade, and it was still exuding a gentle light. There were words on the stone tablet. Ling Han didn't. Instead, he first recovered from his injuries. After recovering some battle prowess, he raised his head again and looked at the stone tablet. When I was young, I charged into the puppet sect alone and annihilated millions of puppets, becoming the first person in history. I set up this formation so that the future generations would remember my greatness. Successor, although you have passed this formation, you should know that I have already reduced the battle prowess of the stone statue formation by a great deal. However, the fact that you were able to pass this formation can be considered not bad. I have some of my glory in the past, so I will give you some rewards. You should remember my greatness and magnanimity. There weren't many words, and Ling Han quickly finished. He couldn't help but grimace, and felt that the person who had set up this stone tablet was really narcissistic. You have to know that I am still in the high extreme now. When I reach consummate level, I don't even need to reach the peak stage. My godly bones will advance to the level of level 5 godly metal, and even if this stone statue formation is 10 times stronger, so what? Forget it. What's the point of bickering with someone who has already been dead for who knows how long? Ling Han shook his head and looked at the stone tablet. There was something that the other person had left behind. I wonder what this narcissistic guy's name is. Ling Han discovered 4 items on the stone tablet, 3 talismans and a black metal ball. Chapter 1106. Whether it's real or fake, we'll know once the Azura Demon Emperor enters it. Ling Han put away the puppet. There were no true origin stones in it, so it could only make some simple changes. It didn't possess any true power. When he put away the puppet, his eyes instantly lit up. He appeared behind the stone statue formation, and there were people running over from both sides. It was as if none of them had noticed that he had disappeared for a period of time. Although this period of time wasn't long, it was still as long as a few breaths, and no one had noticed it. The methods of great elites were truly astonishing. Ling Han, Master! Shui Yinyu and Ding Ping both ran over, undisguised admiration on their faces. This was really too difficult. Even supreme prodigies like Xiao Wuk could only give up, but Ling Han, who was only at the high extreme, had completed the trial. One only had to compare it to know how astonishing this achievement was. Congratulations, Brother Ling. Xiao Sisi and the others also walked over. Meanwhile, Xiao Wuk humped coldly. He hesitated slightly, and then swaggered off with the spear-wielding man and his subordinates. He wanted to kill Ling Han, but under the current circumstances it seemed difficult to do so. Putting aside Ling Han's freakish defenses, Xiao Sisi and the others definitely wouldn't allow it. Thus he chose to leave. Out of sight, out of mind. Some people came over to strike up a conversation with Ling Han, but with Xiao Sisi and the others present, their aura was far too powerful. They were so intimidated that they couldn't speak, and soon all left. Xiao Sisi and the others wanted to befriend Ling Han, so they put on a very humble attitude. However, this wasn't a good place to talk, so the 4 of them agreed to sit down and have a good chat after entering the majestic heaven sect. The crowd dispersed and everyone was slightly disappointed because they had personally seen Ling Han come out of the stone statue formation, but didn't receive any reward. They had worked so hard but didn't receive anything, so it was naturally disappointing. When the crowd dispersed, Ling Han tossed out the metal ball and said, "Little Azura, try entering this puppet." He had already filled it with true origin stones. The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly complied. Pong, this humanoid puppet immediately stamped its foot, exuding an incredibly terrifying aura. "Master, this is a Sun Moon tier puppet," he said in a trembling voice. He was about to faint. Previously, when he had lost 2 pseudo-Sun Moon tier puppets, his heart had ached terribly. Now that he had obtained such great power, he had lost it again. Who would be able to get used to it? He had never thought that in just a year's time, His master would obtain a true sun-moon tier puppet. That was too much of a douche. Try it. What level have you reached? Ling Han asked. The Azura Demon Emperor moved a few times before saying, in reply to Master, there should be someone at the medium extreme of the sun-moon tier. Only medium extreme? Ling Han was slightly dissatisfied, but since he had obtained it for free, he couldn't ask for too much, right? He nodded and said, I'll give this puppet to you to use. Thank you, Master. This little Azura will definitely work harder, be conscientious, meticulous, and give it my all, the Azura Demon Emperor said. However, although he had obtained a sun-moon tier puppet, he didn't dare to have any rebellious thoughts now. Ling Han had long since worn away his ferocity. In his eyes, since Ling Han could give him a sun-moon tier puppet without worry, it meant that he had a stronger trump card in his hands that could easily subdue him. This was not wrong. However, even if Ling Han didn't have something like a Vajra seal, he could still easily subdue the Azura Demon Emperor. The level of the Azura Demon Emperor's divine sense was too low, after all. Ling Han could knock him out with a single 7-kill subduing soul technique, and then easily draw him into the Black Tower. Ling Han first healed his body, no longer being attacked by the stone statues. With the indestructible Heaven Scroll, his recovery speed was astonishing, and he soon became completely fine. He changed into a new set of clothes, smiled and said, let's go. The three people and the puppet continued on their way. On the way, Ling Han told Shui Yinyu and Ding Ping about obtaining the 3 divine seals and the puppet. Who is the person buried here? It doesn't feel like a grave. How can he still be so leisurely after death? Shui Yinyu and Ding Ping both felt that it was inconceivable. You could just bury yourself for no reason, but why did you have to come up with so many tricks? Unwilling to be left out? Ling Han murmured. People couldn't escape death in the end. Perhaps this great elite didn't want to be forgotten by him for singing his praises. The life essence here was very astonishing. Not only could it increase cultivation level, but it could also heal the hidden injuries that cultivators suffered during cultivation and nourish the body. This was very helpful. Some people simply stopped exploring, thinking that their strength was too low, and they couldn't compete with others. Thus, they found a quiet place to stop, and began to cultivate and recuperate. This adjusted the body to the best condition, which was naturally beneficial for cultivation. After a few days, Ding Ping suddenly said, Master, I'm going to break through. With Ling Han's alchemical pills, his cultivation level naturally increased rapidly. This was the immortal realm, and it was relatively easy to improve in the human domain. In terms of mental state, there was also the reincarnation tree. If it wasn't for the fact that Ding Ping wanted to reach the peak of 19 stars of strength, he could have broken through long ago. Ling Han stood guard for him. Even in the galaxy, the regulations of heavenly Tao were everywhere. Immediately, divine lightning rolled and began to strike at Ding Ping. Ding Ping cultivated the shattering void tier to near perfection, but because he wasn't the master of a small world, he had no hope of reaching 20 stars of strength. However, 19 stars was still very awesome, which made his battle prowess incredibly terrifying. This heavenly tribulation was relatively easy for him. Half a day later, he also advanced into the immortal level. Master, can I go out on my own? He was full of longing. He hoped that he could be like his 3 uncles, traveling far and wide and train on his own. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, What, your wings have hardened just like that? Ding Ping hurriedly knelt in fear, and said, This disciple dares not. Ling Han thought for a moment, took out the Swift Cloud Talisman, and handed it to this disciple. He said, Take it. If you encounter danger, you can also escape. In the future, we'll still meet at the entrance. Master. Ding Ping was incredibly excited. This was something that his master had obtained after passing through the stone statue formation. It was incredibly precious. Take it, Ling Han said with a smile. He had the cloud-piercing shuttle, so the Swift Cloud Talisman wasn't as useful to him as he had imagined. Ding Ping respectfully kowtowed to Ling Han, and only then did he take the Swift Cloud Talisman and leave with large strides. Are you really at ease? Shui Yinyu asked. Ling Han didn't say anything. After a while he said, The child has grown up, so he should be allowed to soar. Moreover, when I was at his cultivation level, didn't I already run to the imperial capital by myself? I even managed to pick up a beautiful girl. Shui Yinyu knew that he was teasing her, and couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. However, she was also slightly happy. What woman didn't like to hear their lover praise them for being beautiful? Ling Han laughed loudly, and pulled this seductive beauty into his arms and kissed her. Shui Yinyu was greatly embarrassed. She pointed at the Azura Demon Emperor and said, "There's someone else." The Azura Demon Emperor was shocked, and hurriedly lay down to bark like a dog. He still wanted to wag his tail, yet he discovered that he was no longer that wolf. He couldn't help but feel awkward, and with a bashful smile he said, "Mistress, don't treat little Azura like a human." He was indeed shameless enough. Chapter 1108. Ling Han was very satisfied because he didn't use much power in this strike, and it was completely the power of the divine demon sword itself. It was clearly only a level 3 god tool, but because it was branded with his martial art intent, it actually possessed power above its tier, and could definitely rival a level 4 god tool. Even a god tool could surpass its tier in battle. Shua, the remaining fierce fish, hurriedly waved their tails, turned around and fled. Previously, Ling Han only scaled the fish and didn't kill, so these fierce fish had no scruples, but when they discovered that this person wasn't a great philanthropist to be trifled with, they naturally fled without a trace. This is the world's #1 divine sword? Shui Yinyu naturally also saw Gu Jinhui, and knew that he had specially come to deliver the sword to Ling Han. Ling Han nodded and said, "I owe him a big favor." Shui Yinyu smiled and said, "Definitely a favor, but I believe that only in your hands can this sword truly reach the peak. For a sword forger, this is what they think of the most. Otherwise, hiding it in their own hands would only make a pearl covered in dust." "Wife, you're getting better and better at talking. Your little mouth is really sweet," Ling Han said with a smile, and made to pinch Shui Yinyu's cheek, causing her to roll her eyes at him in annoyance. "I'm so looking forward to it. Come some stronger fierce fish, and let this sword rise to the height of level 4 godly metal." Shui Yinyu looked into the distance, and her expression instantly changed, and she said, "You jinx." A large fish came in front of them. It was several thousand meters long, and though it wasn't the largest, the waves it raised surged over, directly throwing Ling Han and Shui Yinyu out. They didn't have the slightest ability to fight back at all. "This fish's power has reached at least the Sun Moon tier," Ling Han said. The large fish approached aggressively, opening its mouth and inhaling. Instantly, the nearby seawater surged into its mouth. Ling Han and Shui Yinyu were no exception, and were sucked in. "What are you waiting for?" Ling Han shouted. The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly charged out. The power of the Sun Moon tier surged, and he punched out, compressing the seawater and forming a shock wave that continuously expanded towards the large fish. Bam! The large fish was instantly knocked several thousand feet away. The power of this punch was so great that a hole had even appeared on its body, and blood was seeping out. Feeling the pain, the big fish angrily charged back. With a wave of its tail, raging waves rolled. The Azura Demon Emperor charged forward. Though he was pitifully small, his strength was no weaker than the Azura Demon Emperor's. His fist collided head-on with the Azura Demon Emperor's, and both of his fists were repelled. The man and the fish battled fiercely. Neither of them were cultivators in the truest sense of the word. One was a puppet that possessed battle prowess on the level of the Sun Moon tier through true origin stones and formation patterns, while the other was blessed by nature with a massive body and terrifying power. Just like ants, how long do they need to cultivate before they can have the same strength as ordinary people? The abilities of the two of them were about the same, but the puppet had the advantage in that it didn't feel pain, and its body was also forged from high-grade godly metal, so it naturally had a great advantage. After a few dozen moves, many of the scales on the large fish had fallen off, and it began to bleed. It was afraid. With a flick of its tail it ran away. "Fuck your grandpa, I little Azura am really too powerful." The Azura Demon Emperor was very proud of himself. He had defeated an opponent at the Sun Moon tier. This was something that he had never imagined in the past. Too awesome. When Ling Han came over, The Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly swept away the pride on his face. There was a fawning expression on his face, and he said, "Little Azura is really too grateful to Master. Master, you are like a second parent to little Azura. You are the red sun in little Azura's life, shining wherever it shines." He began to flatter madly, completely unaware of the meaning of sappy. "Enough, enough, or else I'm going to vomit." Ling Han hurriedly waved his hand, causing Shui Yinyu to purse her lips into a smile. Only then did the Azura Demon Emperor shut his mouth awkwardly, feeling that he hadn't realized it yet. In any case, it was impossible for him to increase his abilities through cultivation, so he had been training his skills in flattery these few days. It was rare for him to come across such a great opportunity to display his skills, but he had never thought that he would be stopped the moment he opened his mouth. This made him feel slightly depressed. Why didn't Master allow him to display his skills to the fullest? After entering deep into the sea, this forest revealed its magnificent side. These giant seaweeds were no longer a single dark green color. Instead, they had become a riot of colors. There were purple, red, and orange, and the colors of the fish had also become rich and colorful. However, the threat of these fish had increased even more. That was because these big guys clearly didn't have the slightest bit of origin power fluctuation, yet they were born with divine patterns that granted them special abilities. There was a giant octopus that spat out ink when it came into contact with them, turning the surroundings pitch black. Not only would one not be able to see their own fingers in front of them, even their divine sense would be completely blocked, causing them to become completely blind, and could only passively take a beating. There was a giant fish with 5 colored spikes growing out of its head. Ling Han saw it pierce through the body of another giant fish with a single strike, strangling it to death. There were also some that possessed lethal poison. They didn't even need to hit their opponents at all. Wherever their bodies swam past, there would be a poisonous domain. Many giant fish directly flipped over, and were easily poisoned to death. This was a dangerous place. The big fish ate the small fish and the small fish ate the cultivators. Of course, when the big fish were eating, they wouldn't mind eating a few cultivators along the way. There were corpses of giant fish everywhere, as well as the remains of cultivators. Usually there was only a hand, a leg, or a head floating in the sea. The cloud-piercing shuttle wasn't very useful in an environment of water, so Ling Han didn't use this god tool. If he encountered big fish below the medium extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, he would let the Azura Demon Emperor deal with them. If he encountered stronger ones, he would hide in the Black Tower and come out when the waves were calm. The fish here were still somewhat valuable. Some of the fish's bones were metallized, and their quality was comparable to godly metal of the same level. Thus, whenever he encountered them, Ling Han would put them into the Black Tower. In the future, he could use them to increase the power of the divine demon sword. In a certain corner of the deep sea, Empress Luanxing was currently facing off against an old man. Nearby them, there was a 3-colored lotus in full bloom. Even in this kind of environment, one could still smell an incomparably serene fragrance from it. Without a doubt, this was a godly medicine. Otherwise, how could it have attracted Empress Luanxing's attention? However, that old man was actually able to stand against her, which meant that his strength was definitely not ordinary. They both stood with their hands clasped behind their back, and there was not a single drop of seawater in the space of about 3 meters around them. This showed how powerful they were, being able to isolate even the seawater here. "This is only a 3-colored wind and fire lotus," the old man said. "It needs at least a few 100 million years to advance to the 7-colored level, so it's completely useless to ferry. Why don't you give it to me? I won't take it for free, and I'm willing to compensate you with 3 dragon fragrance pills. How about it?" The old man said. The 3-colored wind and fire lotus was a rare treasure of heaven and earth. If a mountain river tier cultivator placed it in their Dantian world, they would be constantly nourished by the divine lotus. Not only would the accumulation of cultivation level increase explosively, but the divine lotus was also a rare treasure of heaven and earth. One could also use the divine lotus to communicate with the Tao of heaven and earth, and even their comprehension of cultivation level would receive a shocking increase. However, when cultivators advanced into the Sun-Moon tier, the essence of the divine lotus would also be extracted, and it would naturally wither. This one was still 3-colored. If it reached 5 colors, it could be used by Sun-Moon tier cultivators, and if it was 7-colored, even heavenly body tier cultivators would view it as a precious treasure. Chapter 1109. Empress Luanxing was shrouded in an aura of primal chaos. Her eyes widened, and numerous large stars appeared behind her before quickly disappearing. Consummate heavenly body tier cultivators could only have 4 stars, but these stars were vanishing too frequently. There were actually countless stars blooming, and a majestic aura surged, displaying the might of a ruler. She humphed and said, "I'll give you 5 dragon fragrance pills." The elder couldn't help but be startled. "Fine, I'll give you 3 dragon fragrance pills to give up on this 3-colored wind and fire lotus, but you're offering 5? Are you trying to throw it at me?" However, the dragon fragrance pill was not an ordinary pill. It could increase the comprehension of heavenly body tier cultivators, and could be said to be extremely precious. He was able to offer 3 dragon fragrance pills because he had a descendant that he was extremely fond of. At present, this descendant had just advanced into the mountain river tier, and with the help of this 3-colored wind and fire lotus, this descendant would definitely be able to advance into the mountain river tier within 1,000 years, or even 100 years. Moreover, he would be able to cultivate his cultivation level to perfection. Otherwise, even the 5-colored wind and fire lotus was useless to him. So how could he offer such a price? Of course, if he had enough patience, he could also plant the divine lotus and let it absorb the essence of heaven and earth. In a few 100 million years it might become 7-colored, and in tens of billions of years it might even become 9-colored. However, with such a long time, who could afford to wait? The elder looked pensive, but immediately nodded decisively, and said, "Fine, 5 dragon fragrance pills, and this 3-colored wind and fire lotus belongs to Fairy." Empress Luanxing casually tossed out a spatial ring, and swiped it at him. She was very domineering, and never hesitated when doing things. She walked towards the divine lotus. "Wait!" The elder stretched out a hand. Empress Luanxing showed a hint of killing intent. Was he going back on his word? I'm not one to go back on my word. However, Fairy, don't you think you should let me check the authenticity of the dragon fragrance pill first? The elder waved his hand, smiling. Empress Luanxing did not speak, but stopped. His reason was not unreasonable. Who could trust a stranger? The elder took out a pill bottle from his spatial ring, opened it and poured out an alchemical pill. After studying it carefully, he smiled and nodded and said, "Fairy is indeed trustworthy." Empress Luanxing walked to the side of the divine lotus, and carefully began to dig it up. This had to be done carefully, because it had to be completely transplanted into the martial artist's dantian. Otherwise, the effects would be greatly reduced. She took out a cloth bag. It was only the size of a palm, but it easily contained the 3-foot-tall divine lotus and tied it around her waist. Spatial spirit tools could not contain living things. This was something that everyone clearly understood. Then what should they do to transplant the godly medicine? What if they were injured in the process of transporting it? Who could bear such a loss? Therefore, the virtual bag came into being. Forcefully restraining a space to contain living creatures could ensure the safety of the divine medicine. However, this space was extremely unstable. Normally, it could only contain plants. If it contained animals, it would have a great impact on this space and it could easily collapse. Even so, the lifespan of each virtual me pouch would not be long, but the advantage was that it could be refined at the heavenly body tier, unlike spatial god tools which needed the power of creation. The elder saw this, and in the instant that Empress Luanxing accepted the divine lotus, he suddenly moved. For heavenly bodies appeared behind him, each of them exuding a boundless ancient aura. Boom! He directly used his ultimate move. This required some time to prepare, but Empress Luanxing had been focused on digging out the godly medicine, giving him the opportunity to prepare. This strike was too terrifying. The surrounding seawater was instantly emptied, and all the giant fish within 1,000 miles directly exploded and died. The elder's strongest attack turned into a black spear, piercing towards Empress Luanxing's waist. He still wanted this 3-colored wind and fire lotus. Empress Luanxing flew into a rage. With a clear shout, She pressed her slender hand back, and thousands of divine patterns intertwined, turning into a net that pressed towards the elder. When an emperor tier was angry, heaven and earth would lose color. They were both at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier, but Empress Luanxing was clearly stronger. As the net intertwined, the black spear was trapped, and then torn to pieces. But at this moment, a crimson light passed through the net, shooting towards Empress Luanxing's neck. Empress Luanxing hurriedly dodged, but the crimson light followed her like a shadow, and its speed was astonishing, finally hitting her hand. Ha 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 ha. The elder laughed loudly, appearing extremely smug. Your Majesty, you've already been hit by my crimson fire needle. If I don't dispel it for you, your vitality will be slowly burned to ashes, and you'll die an extremely miserable death. Hand over the three-colored wind and fire lotus, and I can save your life. After all, it's too much of a pity for a celestial being like you to die like this. A strange light flashed in the elder's eyes. This was an exquisite flower, and she was going to be plucked by him. Moreover, she was the ruler of a nation. If he could make her his slave, what kind of power would he possess? Behind Empress Luanxing, there was a large star floating, exuding an aura that made people tremble. Even the elder's heart was beating wildly, and he felt like he was going to collapse. Too powerful, too powerful. They were both at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier, so why was the gap between them so great? Fortunately, he had enough time to use a powerful attack, and he had even used an ancient god tool. That crimson fire needle was shot out from the saint-destroying crossbow. What was saint? One could only be called a saint after reaching the Genesis tier. And this precious tool was known as the saint-destroying crossbow. Its might was evident. However, the saint-destroying crossbow that he had obtained was a damaged one. Putting aside saints, even eternal river tiers couldn't kill it. However, it was still extremely powerful against heavenly body tier elites. Empress Luanxing didn't attack, and instead asked in a low voice, "You're a member of the Dark Night Hall?" The elder's heart jolted. How had she guessed where he had exposed his weakness? However, it was true that she had been hit by the crimson fire needle. When he thought of this, he relaxed. That's right, he admitted openly. How did you find out? Empress Luanxing didn't answer and continued, going by this logic, this was a trap in the first place. You discovered the three-colored wind and fire lotus here, and I was nearby. You guessed that I would come here sooner or later, and purposely pretended that you discovered this godly medicine at the same time as me, and took the opportunity to bury a killing move. Hey, your Majesty is truly wise. You've guessed everything correctly. Now that things had reached this point, the elder didn't deny it, and said, however, your Majesty, I advise you to give up on any unnecessary delusions. After all, the longer you delay, the more blood and qi in your body will be incinerated. Despicable brat, Empress Luanxing said in disdain. She raised a delicate hand, and a boundless might condensed, exuding a terrifying pressure. The elder paled in shock. How could she still have power after being hit by the crimson fire needle? Hadn't her origin power been incinerated long ago? Chapter 11:10. Empress Luanxing moved, and multiple regulations transformed into divine chains that flew out from her jade-like palms, sweeping towards the old man from the Dark Night Hall. This elder was definitely one of the elites of the Dark Night Hall. In this galaxy, how many people could cultivate to the consummate level of the heavenly body tier? Moreover, what kind of existence was the saint-destroying crossbow? It was definitely a precious treasure in the Dark Night Hall, yet he could take it out and use it. It was clear that he was one of the true higher-ups of the Dark Night Hall. The elder roared, and his skin and bones all lit up. He had been very old before, but now his life essence soared into the sky. He was fighting with all his might. Suppress! Empress Luanxing shouted softly. Her large hand pressed down, and countless divine chains wrapped around it. This was the manifestation of the Great Tao, and it could best show the comprehension of the Great Tao of heaven and earth. The elder's blood essence surged. He still thought that Empress Luanxing had been hit by the crimson fire needle, and her blood was endlessly being consumed. She was at the end of her tether, and she definitely couldn't last for long. As long as he could get through this hurdle, then this world-shaking beauty would become his plaything. Just thinking about it made his heart, which had long been as calm as an ancient well, ripple. His state of mind, which had been cultivated for tens of millions of years, was like a young man anxious to death. Perseverance would be victory, and it would be a visible victory. Capturing this arrogant empress should be the dream of countless powerhouses. If it was accomplished in his hands, then how satisfied would his vanity be? Pung with a single strike, the elder was sent flying. Even his protective origin power shield dissipated, and the seawater invaded, drenching his hair and clothes. Wah! The elder spat out a mouthful of blood. His face filled with shock. How are you so powerful? They were both at the peak stage of the consummate level of the heavenly body tier, and he was also a 4-star genius. Theoretically, Empress Luanxing could only be 1 star more powerful than him. However, from the result of this exchange, the difference in strength between them was more than 1 star. It was at least 3 stars. How is this possible? Rebel die. Empress Luanxing didn't answer at all. She had the heart of an empress, and her words were obeyed by the world. She wouldn't allow anyone to disobey her. If she wanted to kill, who could stop her? The elder took out a helmet and put it on. Instantly, the rules of the great Tao descended from the helmet and interweaved into divine runes that stuck to his body. A quick count revealed that there were more than 1,000 of them. He was a super elite in the first place, and he possessed over 3,000 divine patterns. Added with the 1,000 divine patterns he had just obtained, the aura he exuded instantly skyrocketed to a whole new level. His aura was actually no weaker than Empress Luanxing's. Don't forget that this old man comes from the Dark Night Hall. My inheritance even surpasses the 3 great empires. My foundation is so deep that it far surpasses your majesty's imagination, he said proudly. Relying on external objects? You're nothing but trash, Empress Luanxing said coldly. Divine chains flew out, transforming into sabers, spears, swords, and crossbows that descended from the sky. This really was terrifying, as if the world was going to collapse. The heavens were going to punish that Dark Night Hall elder. The old man's expression changed. He had clearly taken out a high-grade god artifact, but he did not have the slightest confidence that he could emerge victorious. He only felt that the beauty before him was terrifyingly powerful, unimaginably powerful. Finally, he took out a black crossbow, which was inscribed with complicated divine patterns. However, this crossbow was damaged, and only half or even 1/3 of the divine patterns remained because the crossbow had been damaged. It was incomplete. However, this did not hinder the might of this crossbow. The old man no longer used his own power to conceal the existence of this crossbow. Instantly, a terrifying killing intent filled the sky, as if it could kill gods and slay saints. Saint-destroying crossbow, your majesty, I advise you to stop. I've brought a total of 3 crimson fire needles this time, and you've already been hit by 1. If you're hit by another, even I won't be able to save you. I can only watch as you die. Empress Luanxing was completely unfazed. She pressed her palm down, and the entire world became dark. Countless divine chains descended, wanting to slaughter the old man. Humph! A ferocious glint appeared in the old man's eyes. Although he very much wanted to possess this beauty, his own life was more precious in comparison. At this moment he no longer had any lustful thoughts. He struck out with his palm, and thousands of divine patterns intertwined, forming a wall in front of him. Meanwhile, he activated the saint-destroying crossbow, preparing to unleash a devastating strike. In terms of power, he was slightly weaker than Empress Luanxing. However, the god tool hovering above his head was like a tiger that had grown wings. It made up for the gap of at least 1 star in power. Thus, even if he was no match for her, he wouldn't be defeated immediately. He was currently buying time to activate the saint-destroying crossbow, combined with the crimson fire needles. An elite at the heavenly body tier definitely wouldn't be able to survive. Even if 1 crimson fire needle couldn't deal with the old man, he would use 2. Finally, the saint-destroying crossbow was activated. The quality of this god tool was far too high. Even if the old man was astonishingly powerful, activating the god tool twice in a short period of time was still extremely taxing on him. Sweat rolled down his forehead, and even his aura was becoming chaotic. However, once the Saint-destroying crossbow was activated, a terrifying aura instantly swept through the world. This was a Saint tool, even if it was damaged now, and its might had long since diminished. A serious expression appeared on Empress Luanxing's face. Facing such a Saint tool, even she didn't dare to be careless. She gave a soft shout, and 9 great mountains appeared behind her. They all surged toward the old man. Go! The old man gritted his teeth. He no longer held any hope of getting lucky, and he fired the crimson fire needle from the Saint-destroying crossbow. A crimson streak of light shot out, directly passing through Empress Luanxing's blockade of regulations and shooting toward her. A cold smile appeared on the old man's face. As long as he fired the Saint-destroying crossbow, it meant that his opponent would definitely be hit. Unless one's power was above the Saint-destroying crossbow. Moreover, the crimson fire needle could rapidly burn a cultivator's chi and blood. Even heavenly body tier elites wouldn't be able to withstand it for long. Empress Luanxing had already been hit by one of the needles. Even if she had a secret technique, she might be able to temporarily withstand it. However, if both needles were used at the same time, she definitely wouldn't be able to withstand it. Previously, Empress Luanxing had dodged, but this time she didn't even try to dodge. The crimson streak of light directly pierced into her chest. She was done for. The old man was both elated and regretful. After being hit by 2 crimson fire needles, she was naturally doomed. Even he wouldn't be able to save her. However, such a great beauty had died just like that, and he didn't even get to taste her. This was too much of a pity. However, he immediately revealed a look of suspicion and even fear. This was because Empress Luanxing was still standing there, completely unscathed. Her chi and blood were soaring, and her domineering aura hadn't diminished in the slightest. How could she look like someone who had been struck by 2 crimson fire needles? Die! After Empress Luanxing blocked this attack, she unleashed a powerful attack. The surrounding space was shattered by her palm. The old man gritted his teeth and lost all will to fight. He quickly turned around and ran. Empress Luanxing chased after the crimson fire needle for a few steps. However, her footsteps suddenly faltered, and a sliver of confusion appeared in her movements. The first attack was successful, and the 9 Deaths Heaven art was actually unable to completely suppress the crimson fire needle. Fortunately, I was prepared for the second attack and used that strange rock to block the attack. The assassination methods of the Dark Knight Hall were naturally terrifying, and the Saint-destroying crossbow was a precious treasure that could suppress heavenly body tier elites. Humph, even if you flee to the ends of the earth, I will still slaughter you. She gave chase. Chapter 11-12. Xiao. An elder flew over, his powerful aura suffocating everyone. It was as if the heavens were collapsing. This was a supreme elite of the heavenly body tier. Ling Han's expression immediately froze, and he hurriedly retreated. He couldn't oppose such an elite. Even if he had to expose his spatial god tool, he had to hide in the Black Tower. Otherwise, he would be courting death. He flashed to Shui Yenyu's side, picked her up, and was about to enter the Black Tower. However, he suddenly faltered. This was because he sensed another powerful aura. In fact, this aura was even more powerful than this elder's. Moreover, it was slightly familiar. It was Empress Luanxing. As this thought flashed through his mind, he immediately dismissed the idea of entering the Black Tower. Instead, he stood where he was, silently observing the situation. Elder Taifeng. The middle-aged man was pleasantly surprised, but he didn't notice that Elder Taifeng was in an extremely sorry state. His clothes were already in tatters, and they were also covered in blood. A divine chain of regulations suddenly shot over like a sharp spear, catching up to Elder Taifeng. Pooh! It pierced through his shoulder and wrapped around him. Elder Taifeng was in an extremely sorry state. He had already been chased by Empress Luanxing for a day and a night, and he had used all kinds of methods, but they were all ineffective. Before this empress, all of his methods were useless. He didn't dare to fight back. Instead, he used his hand like a sword and slashed at his shoulder. Blood splattered, and half of his shoulder was forcibly sliced off. However, the divine chain that bound him also lost its effect because of this. However, just as he was about to run again, a large white hand descended from the sky. This hand was as clear as jade, and its fingers were long and slender. It was filled with beauty, but in Elder Tai Feng's eyes it was like a death sentence. An expression of despair appeared on his face. He had already used all of his methods and he couldn't block it anymore. Boom! The large hand descended, and he was forcibly suppressed to the bottom of the sea. When the large hand disappeared, at least 1/3 of his bones had been broken. He was coughing blood continuously, and his aura had fallen to rock bottom. Elder Tai Feng. The middle-aged man almost wet his pants in fear. In his eyes, Elder Tai Feng was the #1 assassin in the world. There was no one he couldn't kill. Even if he was stronger than Elder Tai Feng, so what? Assassins wouldn't fight head-on. Instead, they would look for the most suitable opportunity to deal a fatal blow, and then leave regardless of success or failure. Generally speaking, it was very difficult for heavenly body tier elites to die. If they wanted to escape, who could stop them? However, as many as 10 heavenly body tier elites had died at Elder Tai Feng's hands. This was enough to prove how terrifying this trump card assassin was. But now? He was lying on the ground like a dead dog. He wasn't pretending to be dead, but he really couldn't hold on any longer. He shivered. Just who was it that was chasing after Elder Tai Feng? This was simply too heaven-defying. Wang, a terrifying aura swept out, and Empress Luanxing appeared. She was dressed in a bright yellow imperial robe, and a vermilion cloak was tied behind her. The cloak was about 3 meters long, and even though she was at the bottom of the sea, it still fluttered slightly, appearing extremely domineering. Of course, her beautiful figure was also irresistible. Her figure was so perfect that one couldn't find a single flaw. It was enough to make one fall head over heels for her. Empress Luanxing. The middle-aged man said in a trembling voice. As a qualified assassin, he naturally recognized the most powerful elites in the world. He swallowed with difficulty. Everyone said that Empress Luanxing was powerful, and she was one of the 3 rulers of the joint peace planet. He hadn't believed it before, and he thought that this empress had relied on her beauty to climb to the throne. Now, however, he finally realized how wrong he had been. "Your Majesty, spare my life," Elder Tai Feng wailed. "I'm willing to submit to your Majesty, and I'll do anything for you." He was an assassin, not a martyr. So what if he wanted to save his life? Empress Luanxing ignored him completely, and she delivered another palm strike. It was as if she could split open heaven and earth, and destroy the world. Boom! This palm strike directly crushed Elder Tai Feng into pieces, and his body and soul were both destroyed. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man was only slightly dragged along, and he was torn to pieces by the terrifying power. Even his bones were destroyed. So powerful! Ling Han exclaimed in his mind. This was the first time he had seen Empress Luanxing's true might. Her battle prowess could even make heaven and earth pale in comparison. Empress Luanxing landed, and her eyes swept over Ling Han and Shui Yinyu. Suddenly she walked toward them. Ling Han's heart jolted. Although they were all members of the same empire, one couldn't let their guard down. After all, heaven's might was even more unpredictable. Who knew what this empress was planning? Empress Luanxing suddenly staggered as she walked. The aura of primal chaos around her body became chaotic. She was so powerful that she couldn't even walk steadily? Ling Han immediately understood. Although Empress Luanxing had killed a supreme elite of the Dark Knight Hall, she hadn't come without paying a price. True, she must have been ambushed. With the style of the Dark Knight Hall, they would definitely have a 70% to 80% chance of success. "Your Majesty, are you all right?" Ling Han hurriedly asked. This question was only an excuse. Empress Luanxing was obviously targeting Shui Yinyu. "Get out of the way," Empress Luanxing rebuked lightly. She stretched out a hand and pulled Ling Han to the side. Then she grabbed Shui Yinyu's hand, opened her mouth and bit down on her wrist. Ling Han was shocked. At this moment he couldn't care less. He hurriedly rushed forward, using his body to protect her. At this moment he had completely no other thoughts. He only knew one thing. As a man, if he couldn't protect his own woman, then what was the point of living? He felt a sharp pain on his neck. His skin that was as strong as level 4 godly metal was immediately torn open. Empress Luanxing had actually bitten him, and was sucking his blood. "Are you a fuck you blood-sucking vampire?" Ling Han wanted to resist, and he stretched out a hand to push the heavenly body tier. However, how could his power rival that of a heavenly body tier elite? This push was completely useless. His blood was endlessly sucked away, and his consciousness instantly blurred. Shui Yinyu, however, was dumbfounded. This was because the current posture of these two people was really too ambiguous. One was biting the other's neck as if they were kissing, while the other's hands were pressed on the other's voluptuous breasts, and they were even grabbing. It's over, it's over. Shui Yinyu felt as if the world had darkened. Who didn't know that the Empress was pure and unblemished? Although she was loved by countless men, including supreme overlords like the Eternity Sky Emperor and Jade Drop Emperor, she didn't care about them at all. Now she was being molested by Ling Han. Whether he did it intentionally or not, it was the truth. When Empress Luanxing came back to her senses, would Ling Han still be alive? At this moment she really hated Ling Han to death. Why did he make a move? He should have just let the Empress suck his blood dry. In any case, the vitality of immortals was strong, and if their blood was sucked dry, it would only be a great blow to their vitality. They wouldn't die. But now Ling Han was definitely going to die. In her eyes, a firm decision suddenly appeared in her heart. She suddenly drew her sword and stabbed it at Empress Luanxing's back. Chapter 11:13. If only one person could survive, Shui Yinyu naturally hoped that it would be Ling Han. She didn't care how the world would change after Empress Luanxing died, and she didn't care how many people would hunt her and Ling Han down. At this moment, she only wanted Ling Han to be alive. Pa! However, when she thrust her sword forward, it was tightly grasped by a hand, unable to advance any further. Empress Luanxing, she had already raised her head and turned around. Although her expression couldn't be seen, it was definitely furious to the point of madness. Her own subordinate actually dared to assassinate her. A heinous crime of treason. Boundless killing intent surged, bringing with it a terrifying imperial might and domineering aura, causing Shui Yinyu's face to turn pale, completely devoid of blood. However, she was unafraid, and only looked deeply at Ling Han. They couldn't live together, but they could die together. However, the fatal blow that she had imagined didn't come even after a long time. She couldn't help but feel strange and walked towards Empress Luanxing. However, this empress was completely enveloped in an aura of primal chaos, and her expression was impossible to see. Ling Han's body moved and he woke up. A large amount of blood loss caused him to instantly faint, but his spirit was very strong and resilient, so he naturally woke up very quickly. He reached out and grabbed Empress Luanxing's wrist, his expression determined. "If there's anything, come at me." He was very weak, but his tone was resolute. Empress Luanxing was furious. How pure was she? Yet she actually sucked the blood of a stinky man. This made her feel as if she had been sullied. She decisively raised her hand, and 4 stars appeared behind her. Each star exuded a terrifying aura, instantly causing Ling Han's skin to burst open. However, all his blood had been sucked away, and not a single drop of blood flowed out at this moment, appearing very strange. Biting the hand that feeds you. Ling Han wouldn't wait for death in vain, and immediately said, "Don't think I don't know that you were injured before, and sucked my blood to control your injuries, or use a secret technique." "So what?" Empress Luanxing asked coldly. Her target had been Shui Yinyu in the first place. It wasn't like she would kill her, so why did she have to get close to her? Tui, she had sucked this man's dirty blood, and had even become intimate with him. Just thinking about it gave her goosebumps. It was disgusting to the extreme. As an emperor, you have to be able to distinguish between kindness and grudges. If you kill us, you would be considered to be muddle-headed and tyrannical. Ling Han said whatever came to his mind. Now that he had fallen into the hands of an elite of the heavenly body tier, and could not possibly escape into the Black Tower, he naturally had to think of a way. So what if I betray the entire world? Empress Luanxing wasn't fooled. Do you have any last words? Fuck, you don't play by the rules. Ling Han racked his brains, but the disparity in strength was too great, and no idea seemed to be of any use. Humph! Empress Luanxing moved. A palm strike aimed at Ling Han's head. Ling Han couldn't care less. Even if he had to expose the secret of the Black Tower, he had to let Small Tower make a move. At worst, he would just flee to the ends of the world. Now that he had entered the immortal realm, the world was vast, unlike the small world where elites could easily find him in such a small place. However, Empress Luanxing's palm strike came to a halt midway. Damn it! The Empress cursed in her mind. At this moment, the Ninth King's will actually appeared, stopping her from slamming down this palm strike. She wanted to sever this thought, but if she did so, the implications would be too great. It meant that her million years of effort would go up in smoke. As expected, she had stopped it too late. This detestable man had already formed a favorable impression of the Ninth King, and was affecting her at this moment. She hardened her heart, and was about to slap down again, but a wave of grief circulated in her heart, causing her to stop again. Detestable, detestable. Empress Luanxing humphed, and tossed Ling Han out, saying coldly, "Today's matter has never happened." After saying this, her figure leaped, and instantly disappeared without a trace. How unreasonable! Ling Han gritted his teeth. He had already channeled a drop of indestructible true fluid, but this was used to heal his wounds. In fact, he wasn't actually injured, but he had suffered a great loss of origin power. Even the indestructible true fluid couldn't completely recover, and his face was still pale. Meanwhile, Shui Yinyu felt as if she were dreaming. They had actually escaped a calamity. Master, I've missed you so much. The Azura Demon Emperor appeared, looking terrified. Fuck off. Ling Han sent him flying with a kick. This guy was indeed unreliable. Previously, when Empress Luanxing was present, he didn't even dare to fart, but now he ran out. However, it was no wonder. Even if the Azura Demon Emperor ran out, he would only be courting death. Thus, Ling Han only sent him flying to vent his anger, and didn't kill him. Phew, I didn't die. How fortunate. Ling Han breathed out. He'd just take it as being bitten by a dog. There were plenty of tonics in the Black Tower, and it wouldn't take long for his origin power to recover. Meanwhile, Shui Yinyu rolled her eyes at him, and said, "Do you know that you molested Her Majesty just now?" Ha! Ling Han wore a strange expression. Are you joking? Just now I was almost sucked dry, and I can still molest that woman? Humph! I clearly saw that both your hands were on Her Majesty's breasts. Shui Yinyu was full of jealousy. Previously, she was only concerned about Ling Han, and now that he was safe, she naturally began to feel jealous. What? Ling Han was stunned and raised his hands in disbelief. These two people actually grabbed Empress Luanxing's breasts? Fuck, why didn't he have any impression at all? He didn't feel anything at all. Are you still thinking about it? Shui Yinyu humphed. Men were indeed unreliable. What are you being jealous about? Ling Han pulled her closer. I almost died just now, so how could I think so much? Shui Yinyu also showed an expression of lingering fear. One of them had grabbed the Empress's breasts, and the other had attempted to commit regicide, but neither of them had died. This was practically an inconceivable miracle. My wife's hands are still the best. Ling Han snickered and clasped the tea-bowl-sized breasts on Shui Yinyu's breasts. The feeling was really wonderful. Pervert, pervert. Shui Yinyu reprimanded. She was just about to pinch Ling Han, yet discovered that Ling Han had fallen into her arms unconscious. Instantly, tenderness filled her heart, and she wrapped her arms around Ling Han. This man had stepped forward to protect her. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been such trouble later. She couldn't help but reveal a sweet smile. If a woman could encounter a man who was willing to risk his life for her, what else could she ask for? She hugged Ling Han, letting him rest comfortably in her soft bosom. She tried her best to rest. However, she still didn't understand. The Empress had clearly developed a frightening killing intent towards them, so why had she stopped? Was there anything in this world that could make the Empress feel apprehensive? Definitely not. But she soon threw this thought to the back of her mind, and only stared at Ling Han in a daze, a sweet feeling in her heart. Chapter 11:14. After an unknown amount of time, Shui Yinyu discovered that Ling Han had opened his eyes and was staring at her. She was embarrassed, and was about to release Ling Han when she felt her waist tighten. She had already been hugged by Ling Han. "Wife, let me lie for a while," Ling Han said in her arms. Shui Yinyu was both embarrassed and happy, but she was thin-skinned, so she scolded, "How old are you? Why are you still acting like a spoiled child?" Ling Han laughed loudly, and nibbled twice on her breast. Only then did he stand up and said, "After a nap I feel much more energetic." Although his origin chi had not completely recovered, it had indeed recovered quite a bit. Shui Yinyu rolled her eyes. This guy was really addicted to taking advantage of her, and had to make a move no matter what. The Azura Demon Emperor had already returned, and was obediently waiting in the distance, not daring to make a sound. Ling Han randomly ate some ginseng, Ganoderma, and other tonics, and then said, "Let's continue. Don't you want to rest a bit more?" Shui Yinyu was still worried about Ling Han. After all of his blood had been sucked away, and even with Ling Han's recovery ability, it was still difficult. "I'm fine." Ling Han broke into a smile, and then scratched his head. "But if we encounter that Empress again, how should we face her?" He had been confident before, but that was because he didn't know that he had once grabbed Empress Luanxing's big bun. However, if they met again in the future, he would definitely involuntarily glance at Empress Luanxing's chest and recall how it felt. If she saw him, he would probably go crazy. "Sai, what's going on?" He sighed. Shui Yinyu shook her head, and said, "I believe that if this matter is leaked, you will even be hunted down by the Eternity Sky Emperor and Jade Drop Emperor. 2 rulers chasing a mountain river tier cultivator?" This sounded funny, but it wasn't impossible. Who didn't know that these 2 emperors were filled with admiration for Empress Luanxing? They had repeatedly said that as long as the Empress agreed to marry them, they were willing to give their empire as her dowry. Now that the goddess in their hearts had been assaulted, would they be sentenced to death by them? Ling Han counted on his fingers with a smile, and said, "How many heavenly body tier elites have I offended?" Shui Yinyu could only roll her eyes. A mere mountain river tier cultivator could attract the attention of so many heavenly body tier elites. Ling Han was probably the only one in the whole world who could do this. This caused her to be both speechless and impressed. Try another mountain river tier cultivator. To say nothing of mountain river tier cultivators, even sun moon tier elites didn't have such qualifications. The 2 of them continued forward. After going through life and death together, their feelings for each other had naturally deepened. Occasionally, they would exchange a glance, and their hearts would be filled with sweetness. Naturally, they did not feel bored along the way. Just a glance from the other party would fill their hearts. Just like before, they would let the Azura Demon Emperor fight those they could defeat, and hide from those they couldn't. Though the giant fish here were powerful, they didn't cultivate, nor did they develop intelligence. Thus, they didn't have to worry about them discovering the secret of the Black Tower. 10 days later, a pagoda appeared in front of them. This was a golden pagoda with 9 floors, but its height pierced through the surface of the sea. It was incomparably majestic. There were people currently entering the bottom floor, but there were also people who wanted to enter from the 2nd and 3rd floors. However, they were sent flying by a bolt of lightning the moment they approached. Some were killed, while others were severely wounded. Obviously, without sufficient strength, it was impossible to enter from the top floor. They could only enter from the bottom floor. "Let's go," Ling Han said. The 2 of them and the puppet walked over. The entrance to the bottom floor of the pagoda was ridiculously large. It was 300 meters tall, and about 150 meters wide. This was enough to accommodate a few hundred people entering at the same time. Ling Han entered, and the Azura Demon Emperor transformed into a small ball. Ling Han put it away so that he wouldn't give himself away. He didn't seem like a puppet. "Brother Ling," someone called out. Ling Han turned around and saw that Xiao Sisi, Duan, and the others had already arrived. Naturally, the annoying Xiao Wuk was also here. Aside from these 4 young king tiers, there were 3 other people standing beside them. Their auras were not the slightest bit weaker. Come. Let me introduce everyone, Duan said with a smile. Duan smiled. He pointed at Ling Han and said, "This is Ling Han, brother Ling. He's the only person who has ever passed the stone statue formation." Hearing this, the 3 young men all looked astonished. They couldn't help but stare at Ling Han. They hadn't passed the stone statue formation because they had done so with the elders of their clans. Indeed, they had encountered the stone statue formation, but it was either at the sun-moon tier or at the heavenly body tier. They hadn't even had the chance to try. However, this didn't stop them from knowing how terrifying the stone statue formation was. As far as they knew, no one had ever passed it. Even those veteran heavenly body tier elites had failed at the 6th or 7th stage. According to the speculations of those elites, if one wanted to pass the stone statue formation, not only would one have to reach the peak stage of a major tier, but they would also have to possess battle prowess of at least 9 stars. Was this possible? Now, however, an example of success had appeared in front of them. How could they not be astonished? If it weren't for the fact that these words had come from Duan's mouth, they would definitely have treated them as nonsense. Ling Han, these 3 are Quan Lishuan, Luo Jingren and Guan Rong. It won't be long before we meet again in the Majestic Heaven sect. We'll become fellow disciples, Duan said with a smile. Ling Han nodded. He clasped his hands in greeting and said, "Greetings to the 3 of you." The 3 young men didn't dare to be disrespectful. Thinking about how freakish Ling Han was, his background wouldn't be any weaker than theirs. Thus they were all extremely polite. Meanwhile, Xiao Wuk sneered. He felt that Ling Han's appearance was becoming more and more repulsive. Quan Lishuan and the others were all intelligent, and they immediately understood that Ling Han and Xiao Wuk weren't on good terms. However, their backgrounds weren't any weaker than Xiao Wuk's. Thus, they naturally didn't need to be wary of him and distance themselves from Ling Han. Who arrived first? What's the situation with this tower? Ling Han asked. Haha, brother Ling, you came at the right time. We just happened to form a team, Su Jing said with a smile. Meanwhile, Xiao Sisi started to explain, and said, "This tower requires 10 people of the same cultivation level to pass through it together. As long as one person fails, the entire team will be eliminated. Moreover, there's only one chance." Ling Han gave an "oh." No wonder prodigies like them were all waiting here. They all wanted to ensure that nothing went wrong. One person might not be able to hold out against 9 people. Moreover, it wouldn't matter if they could try again if they failed. They could just treat it as learning experience the first time. However, if they failed once, they wouldn't be able to enter again. Thus, everyone naturally had to be careful. "Are there any benefits to passing through this tower?" he asked. Xiao Wuk sneered again. What an unscrupulous person. He only thought about benefits and whatnot. Didn't they feel that being able to do what others couldn't was what supreme prodigies should do? "I don't know." Xiao Sisi shook her head and said, "Those who failed have already come out. They can stay here, but they can't form teams to try again." Meanwhile, the others didn't appear again. Perhaps they've entered the 2nd, 3rd, or even 9th level. Ling Han broke into a smile and said, "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go." Chapter 11:16. Even though the people here were all supreme prodigies, they still felt their scalps go numb, and a strong sense of fear welled up in their hearts. Right before their eyes, a shadow had disappeared without a trace. They had all kept a close eye on it, but because the attack had created a huge shockwave that affected their divine sense slightly, a slight gap appeared, and they lost track of the shadow's whereabouts. "It's all your fault." Xiao Wuk pointed at Ling Han, a look of blame on his face. "If you hadn't forced yourself to attack, that mysterious thing would have escaped." He was using this as an excuse to make a fuss. He was already displeased with Ling Han in the first place. Shui Yanyu was furious and said, "If it wasn't for Ling Han's reminder, you wouldn't have known that there was a shadow following us." Xiao Wuk was a prodigy after all, and had already given up on her after a few encounters. Naturally, he had also severed the admiration in his heart. Hearing this, he humped coldly and said, as a team we naturally have to prioritize the team. This person thinks that everyone here is more powerful than him, and that there's no need for him to attack. Now that mysterious shadow has escaped in vain. Ling Han was also angry and said, after we get out, I'll beat you to death. Xiao Wuk smirked coldly. After they got out, the one to be beaten up would only be Ling Han. His opponent was only powerful in terms of physique and recovery ability. Wasn't that just a punching bag? He said, I'll keep you company. Heh, everyone, let's focus on how to find that shadow first. Luo Jingren stepped out to mediate. This was originally none of his business, but now that they were all in the same team, anyone who made a mistake would implicate the entire team. Meanwhile, Su Jing pondered for a moment and said, have you guys ever heard of an existence that has no physical body, only a shadow? Everyone shook their heads. This was too uncanny. No matter what, our goal is to get out of here. Once we're about to succeed, that mysterious shadow will definitely attack, Duan said. This received everyone's approval. If this mysterious shadow wanted to stop them from passing this trial, then it would definitely attack. Otherwise, they didn't need to pay any attention to it. In any case, their first goal was to get out of here. They moved forward again, but this time everyone's eyes were fixed on the swaying shadows on the ground. The light here came from the glowing pillars. Because of this, every time they passed by a pillar, the shape of their shadows would change. After walking for an unknown amount of time, the number of shadows changed. The 10 of them stopped in their tracks at the same time, their expressions showing that they had expected this. There were more shadows on the ground, and not 11 but 12. Fuck. Phantom Shadow still has companions? Shui Yinyu couldn't help but lean closer to Ling Han. She was a woman and was naturally fearful of this kind of unknown things. Moreover, her lover was right beside her, so she had unknowingly developed a sense of dependence on him. The crowd did not attack blindly, because they did not know which two figures belonged to Ghastly Shadow. Separate a bit, everyone maintained a certain distance from the people on both sides. This way, the two silhouettes wouldn't be able to blend in with the group of shadows and appear out of place. Kill. The 10 of them attacked at the same time, each displaying their strongest power. Bam over there. Ling Han opened the Eye of Truth, locked onto a ghostly shadow, and chased after it. This ghostly shadow had the ability to change nimbly. Just then it had been the same size as their figures, but now it had soared into the air, transforming into a small black dot. It was so small that it was almost indiscernible. No wonder it had escaped previously. Ling Han stabbed out with his sword, and the divine demon sword transformed into a streak of light. He had already activated the fast technique, and it was indescribably fast. Pooh, the tip of the sword stabbed into the small black dot, and there was actually a feeling as if it had stabbed into something solid. Ling Han shook the blade of his sword, and a huge shock wave spread out, shattering the small black dot. Instantly, countless wisps of black smoke rose, and there was even an ear-piercing screech. No, this wasn't a sound but a divine sense, which transmitted into Ling Han's mind and caused an impact. Humph, trying to shake his divine sense? What a joke. If one wanted to injure his soul, they would at least have to be at a much higher cultivation level than him. Even those at the consummate level of the mountain river tier couldn't possibly injure Ling Han's soul. Under the tempering of the indestructible heaven scroll, his divine sense was far too tough. The screech was like a flood that had hit a dam, and it instantly bounced back. A hint of surprise appeared on Ling Han's face. This kind of attack, or rather this kind of form, was slightly familiar to him. Shwa, the wisps of black smoke condensed again, transforming into a shadow. Then it suddenly waved its arm. Chong chong chong. 5 sharp claws actually shot out from its hand, and they were like 5 sharp blades. Humph, insignificant tricks. Guanrong was beside Ling Han, and he naturally wasn't willing to let Ling Han steal all the limelight. He immediately formed a fist and punched out. There were as many as 60 divine patterns on his fist, making it seem as if his arm had become a supreme god weapon. Pung, the fist landed on the ghostly shadow's sharp claws, and the divine patterns lit up. It was instantly blocked by the ghostly shadow's attack, and even sent the ghostly shadow flying. Obviously, whether it was power or battle prowess, the ghostly shadow was far from being a match for those at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Guanrong's confidence instantly soared after his strike succeeded. The unknown was the most terrifying thing. Now, the strength that this ghostly shadow displayed was at most in the high extreme of the mountain river tier. It was just that it was extremely strange, so Guanrong naturally wasn't as cautious as before. However, this ghostly shadow seemed to be similar to Ling Han, possessing an astonishing recovery ability. As the black smoke swirled, it immediately returned to its original appearance, and once again waved its claws. As a cold glint flashed, its figure swayed like a god of death. At this moment, everyone naturally understood that the corpses that had been split up previously hadn't been done by demonic beasts, but rather by this ghostly shadow. It could slice a person into 6 pieces with a single strike, and added with its seemingly indestructible body, it couldn't be underestimated. Ling Han followed up and used the 7-kill subduing soul technique. Ah! A mournful scream rang out in everyone's mind. This was the wailing of the ghostly figure. The ghostly shadow could no longer maintain its original appearance. Instead, it was constantly changing. One moment it was a human, the next moment it was a beast, and the next moment it was a fish, and then it turned into a bird. In the end it was a mess, as if it was about to fall apart. As expected, Ling Han nodded in his heart. This kind of thing was almost unafraid of physical attacks. It could recover immediately after being shattered, but it would be destroyed if it encountered a spiritual attack. Guanrong immediately laughed and said, "So these things are afraid of soul attacks? Humph! My soul-refining swords." Xiao Wuk waved his hands and countless golden swords flew out from his eyes. These weren't physical swords. Rather, they were formed from his divine sense. Xiao xiao xiao. The 10,000 swords shot forth in unison, and the other ghostly figure was naturally unable to escape. It was nailed to the pillar by the golden swords. It also let out a blood-curdling screech as its body greatly changed. Very quickly, it twisted a few times before completely disappearing. Chapter 11:17. A smug smile appeared on Xiao Wuk's face. It was the same spiritual shock, but Ling Han could only seriously injure Gue Ying, while he was able to instantly kill him, showing the gap in the cultivation of the two's spiritual consciousness. Ling Han glanced at him and couldn't help but feel disdain in his heart. The 7-kill subduing soul art just now wasn't his full strength. He wanted to know just how strong this ghostly shadow was. Naturally, he wanted to increase the power of the 7-kill subduing soul art step by step. However, in Xiao Wuk's eyes, this was a sign that Ling Han was weak. Ling Han had no intention of arguing with him. Once they were out of here and the team was disbanded, he would definitely beat this guy up. He would let him know that being cocky was just asking to be humiliated. "What is this?" Xiao Sisi asked. She was a woman and a great beauty, so she didn't mind showing some ignorance. This wouldn't make others look down on her. On the contrary, even if they didn't understand men's words, they wouldn't easily open their mouths, especially among a group of geniuses. Who didn't want face? Everyone was silent because no one could recognize what this thing was. Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, "This might not be a being from the God realm." "What?" Everyone blurted out. If it wasn't a being from the God realm, then what was it? "Ling Han, don't be an alarmist," Xiao Wuk immediately reprimanded. Ling Han didn't even bother to look him in the eye as he said, "If my guess is correct, this should be something from the netherworld." This made him think of the Azura demon emperor, who also didn't have a physical body, and also possessed divine sense attacks. Moreover, they were both very weak. However, this ghostly shadow seemed to have lost its intelligence, and could only make some attacks mechanically. Otherwise, if it had been the Azura demon emperor, with such a strong opponent, how could he have possibly come forward to die? Netherworld. All the prodigies revealed solemn expressions. They were very lucky. The barrier between the two worlds in this galaxy was extremely sturdy, and no passageway had appeared. Thus, they did not need to fight against the Netherworld realm. They had only heard of such a place. However, experts like Venerable Trinity, who had retired from the two-realm battlefield, were still unable to exterminate the Netherworld invaders. This showed just how powerful the Netherworld was. "Brother Ling, are you sure?" Su Jing's expression was very serious. If a Netherworld realm being really appeared here, then that would really be incredible. Although this ghostly shadow was very weak, it was very likely that there were even stronger Netherworld realm beings here. This means that there may be a passageway between the two worlds in their galaxy, or super war. Ling Han shook his head and said, "I'm just guessing. Besides, even if they really are from the Netherworld, that doesn't necessarily mean there's a passageway between the two worlds. Perhaps the owner of the Great Necropolis brought them here from somewhere else." This was indeed very possible. Ling Han had seen the narcissism of this tomb owner before. After passing through some puppet sect formation, he would only duplicate one, no several of them. That was because the stone statue formation that Heavenly Body Tier and Sun Moon Tier cultivators had passed through was obviously not the same. Then, this tomb owner had killed many great elites of the Netherworld in the two-realm battlefield, so it didn't seem impossible that he had captured some of them and thrown them here to sing his praises. However, this tomb owner should have died countless years ago. If he had really captured Netherworld realm beings and brought them here, would he have been able to live for so long? Ling Han shook his head. At least for now there was no solution, so there was no need to waste time. This ghostly shadow was muddle-headed, and it didn't have any intelligence to speak of. They had already followed Ling Han and the others. They were like children playing, so they naturally couldn't ask for any clues. Thus, everyone directly used their divine sense attacks to kill the remaining ghostly shadow. This kind of ghostly shadow was very strange. After being killed, it directly turned into mist and dissipated, leaving no corpse behind. Ling Han used his divine sense to ask the Azura Demon Emperor. This was an authentic native of the Netherworld. After hearing Ling Han's words, the Azura Demon Emperor hurriedly said, "According to Master's description, I am 90% sure that this is a creature of the Netherworld, and they are called the Shadow Devourer tribe." Shadow Devourer tribe? Ling Han was surprised. That's right. This kind of creature feeds on shadows, and by devouring shadows, they can absorb the life essence of the shadow owner, killing people invisibly, the Azura Demon Emperor said. However, the ghostly shadow that Master spoke of is clearly not right. It seems to have lost its consciousness, and only instinctively attached itself to Master's shadow, not causing any harm. Ling Han nodded. This should be the Shadow Devourer tribe, but their consciousness had already been destroyed by the tomb owner, and even their ability to devour shadows had disappeared. They only instinctively liked to follow shadows. Let's continue. Who cares if these ghostly shadows are from the Netherworld? They aren't powerful at all, and we can easily deal with them, Li Quanqian said proudly. Indeed, divine sense attacks could pose a great threat to ordinary immortals, but Li Quanqian and the others were all descendants of super forces, and had secret techniques to cultivate their divine sense. Not only were they powerful, but they also had divine sense attacks. Thus, they really didn't fear the ghostly shadows here. They started walking, and not long after, the number of shadows on the ground increased. This time they were prepared, so they naturally didn't have the slightest fear. They attacked one by one and killed these ghostly shadows. In fact, it wasn't just divine sense attacks that could threaten these ghostly shadows. Fierce flames, lightning, and other techniques could also cause damage, but the effects wouldn't be as obvious as divine sense attacks. The ghostly shadows were least afraid of direct physical attacks. Thinking back to the time when the Azura Demon Emperor was cut into 9 pieces, he still didn't die for 100,000 years, which showed this. Haha, so it's so simple. After walking for a while, they saw a massive metal door appear in front of them. It was very likely to be the end of the first stage. Everyone smiled. For ordinary mountain river tier cultivators, this path was actually not easy to pass, because the ghostly shadows came and went without a trace. And aside from the descendants of super forces, how many people cultivated divine sense attacks? Thus, if it were someone else, it would definitely be very difficult for them to pass. Wait! When they neared, they discovered that there was a massive demonic beast lying in front of that door, but because its color was too similar to the tiles on the ground, it was very difficult to distinguish it from a distance. It was difficult to describe what this demonic beast looked like, because it was lying on the ground like an extremely flat carpet. The demonic beast guarding the stage? It's here. We have to defeat it. Let's test the waters first. Xiao Sisi smiled faintly and said, then let me show off. She drew out a bow. There were divine patterns on the bow, and the arrow was the same. This was a god tool. So Fairy Xiao is also skilled in archery. Everyone praised. At the same time they were slightly wary. Elites that were skilled in archery could attack from an extremely long distance, and it was impossible to guard against them. I've only made a small accomplishment, Xiao Sisi said modestly as she drew the bow. Wang, the divine patterns on the bow and arrow all lit up, exuding a domineering aura. Everyone's hearts trembled. The might of this arrow could not be underestimated. Even they had to be careful when facing it head-on, and if they were ambushed, there was a very high possibility that they would be hit. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.